Chapter 1556. His heart sank to the bottom of the valley. After working so hard for so long and putting in so much effort, this was the result he got. Anyone would be disappointed. Lin Feng was also a human being. Even if he was a human sovereign, even if he was unbelievably powerful, he was still a human being with emotions and desires. He had things he cared about and wanted to get. It didn't matter if he failed again and again. But the most disappointing thing was that he couldn't find his mother after searching the entire area. Damn it! Lin Feng clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. At this moment, he wished that the great sage would come and fight with him to vent his anger. Disappointment spread in his heart. Perhaps there were rare treasures and secrets of the demon clan in the palace, but he had no interest in them at all. Everything he did was to find his mother. He did everything he could for himself, for his father, and for his mother. As a son, he didn't do anything. Mother, Lin Feng murmured softly with a dazed look in his eyes. At this moment, his heart sank to the bottom of the valley. He was a little confused, a little dazed, and a little at a loss. But suddenly, thump, thump, thump. The violent heartbeat sounded inexplicably like the sound of a war drum. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Lin Feng suddenly quivered and opened his eyes wide. This is danger. The great sage is here? No. Lin Feng opened his eyes wide and cold sweat dripped from his forehead. This wasn't a signal of danger, nor was it a warning. It was a kind of spiritual bond, a call connected by blood. It's my mother. It's my mother. It's really my mother. Lin Feng was surprised and happy, but his face turned extremely ugly in an instant. Although it was his mother's call and a message from his mother, it wasn't good news, but downright bad news. The call in his heart told him that his mother was in danger, and it was a very strong, life-threatening danger. That was why he had such a deep feeling. Say. Lin Feng's body trembled slightly, and his face turned pale. At this moment, he could no longer keep calm. His thoughts were in a mess. His body moved like a shadow and went straight to the palace, but it was a subconscious action. Swish! Lin Feng's eyes were bloodshot. He entered the palace and searched like a madman. He shuttled back and forth in this huge and majestic palace anxiously. The warning in his chest grew stronger and stronger, and he felt as if his mother's life force was slowly slipping away. His spine turned cold, and his entire body trembled violently. No, don't! Lin Feng was practically screaming hysterically. Calm down. I must remain calm. The signal sent by the doppelganger was very strong. The doppelganger sensed the change in the main body's emotions and instantly gave the most timely reminder. The more anxious he was, the more chaotic it would be, and the easier it would be for things to go wrong. Pa! He clenched his fists tightly, causing his veins to bulge like earthworms. It was extremely hideous, just like Lin Feng's expression at this moment. His eyes were bloodshot, and his breathing was rapid. His entire body had fallen into a hysterical state of mind, and it was difficult for him to calm down. Huff, 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 huff. Lin Feng took deep breaths again and again. Only then did he slowly pull himself back from the edge of collapse. It was rare for him to lose control of his emotions, but it didn't mean that it wouldn't happen. It was just that he hadn't encountered something that could really affect his heartstrings. Now it finally happened. I must remain calm. Lin Feng bit his lips until they bled. His eyes were bloodshot. There's no reason for such a coincidence. I sensed that my mother was in danger as soon as I entered the restriction, but I couldn't sense it after such a long time outside. Most likely, my mother is in this restriction. Lin Feng quickly judged, and his eyes were burning. He subconsciously looked around the palace. There was still no one in sight. The spread of the aura had already been probed. There was no aura of life in the palace, nor was there any other restriction or trap. The entire palace was clean. There was nothing special except for the abundant spiritual qi. Mother was not in the palace. Stupid. Lin Feng fiercely slapped his head and felt angry. If his mother was in the palace, it meant that she had broken the restriction and entered here. Then, it would be easy for her to leave. In other words, the answer was obvious. Mother didn't find the life gate. Lin Feng nodded heavily. His mother was either trapped in the restriction, or she had entered the other two light spots, or the button shaft, or the death gate. The death gate. Cold sweat dripped down Lin Feng's forehead, and he felt suffocated. To him, the illusion of the death gate was nothing. But what about his mother? She didn't have the Pangu pupil. The death gate. Mother is in the death gate. Lin Feng murmured, and his body trembled slightly. The answer was very clear and direct. Things couldn't be so coincidental. Since he could sense that his mother was in danger, she must be in the restriction. After entering this strange restriction, no matter how hard he tried, he would always find one of the 3 points. The life gate was usually the point that was hidden the deepest. On the contrary, the death gate was the easiest to find. This was the secret of most of the formations. Wait for me, mother. Lin Feng's eyes were like torches and extremely cold. In an instant, he shot out like an unsheathed sword without any hesitation. Even if it was a dragon's pool, a tiger's den, or even a hell, he dared to go. For his mother, for his family, there was no place that he couldn't go. Even if he had to die, he had to save his mother. As long as he had the slightest bit of strength left, Lin Feng went crazy. No one would take the initiative to enter the death gate of a restriction, especially such a terrifying restriction. There was only a slim chance of survival. However, Lin Feng did it without any hesitation. 2 light spots. Choose one. How was Lin Feng's luck? This time his luck was quite bad. However, in Lin Feng's opinion, his luck was quite good. It was as if the heavens were fond of him, and he had never had such good luck before. His intense heartbeat quickened, and the connection between his bloodline allowed him to choose accurately the death gate. Boom! Boom! As soon as he entered, Lin Feng knew what was going to happen. Attacks that blotted out the sky and covered the earth surged crazily, and the shrill screams of ghosts echoed in his ears. It was miserable and terrifying. Illusions appeared in front of him one after another. Endless ghosts came from all directions, pouncing on him and biting him crazily. Their sharp claws covered the sky, and their strength was extremely terrifying. This was undoubtedly the death gate. Scram! Lin Feng shouted, and the Pangu pupil flashed. Bright light shot out in all directions, as if a bright and beautiful light had illuminated the sky, causing the surrounding darkness to disappear in an instant. The ghosts seemed to have seen their natural enemy, and their ferocious faces were filled with horror. Their bodies exploded into pieces, and their shrill cries instantly weakened by a lot. Although the illusions in the distance continued to attack, the surroundings were already quiet. Bang! 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 In the entire world, it seemed that only the sound of his heartbeat was left, and a thin figure that was like a willow in the wind, not far away. Mother! Lin Feng widened his eyes. Chapter 1557. He couldn't be more familiar with that figure. Even though there was still some distance between them, he definitely wouldn't be mistaken. Not to mention, the bloodline connection was guiding him and calling him. She was his mother, Jiayaju. She wore a light yellow gauze draped over her shoulders. Her delicate body was on the verge of collapsing, as if a gust of wind could blow her over. Her otherworldly face was pale and bloodless. Her lips were dry as if they had lost all moisture. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her brows were deeply furrowed. Her aura was incomparably weak. She felt as if she had lost her life force, but her body was faintly trembling, as if she was using her last bit of strength to resist. Mother! Lin Feng roared and instantly dashed out. A light flashed, and the Pangu pupil emitted an extremely strong energy, destroying all the surrounding illusions. The energy of the Pangu pupil completely suppressed the illusions. The illusions couldn't even get close to Lin Feng. The moment they touched him, they exploded into pieces. Pa! Lin Feng came to Jiayaju's side. His eyes were red, and tears flowed out uncontrollably. Heavily injured, Mother's life force was almost exhausted. Pong! Pong! The energy of the Pangu pupil directly destroyed the illusions. Jia Yaju's trembling body seemed to tremble. She was like a withered flower that had a pot of water poured on it. Her beautiful eyelashes fluttered, and she let out a soft moan. She was so weak that she couldn't even open her eyes. But in her hazy state, she knew who was hugging her. Feng. Jia Yaju's voice couldn't be heard. Her lips were moving, but Lin Feng knew what she was saying and what she wanted to say. The closest relationship was just a mother and son. Don't talk, mother. Lin Feng bit his lips. A light flashed in his hand, and a sparkling and translucent fruit appeared. It was milky white and translucent, and it was plump and juicy. This was a top-grade star fruit that Wing picked on the 6th floor of Demon Emperor Island. He didn't recognize it, but it contained a rather dense soul power, which was 1,000 times stronger than the soul-returning fruit. Pa! Directly stuffing it into his mother's mouth. Lin Feng lightly exhaled, and the celestial fruit instantly slid into his mother's body. Whoosh! Majestic energy spread out in an instant, rushing madly into Jia Yaju's body. Lin Feng's eyes were bright, but he was not worried. Even if his mother was on the verge of death, she was still an existence whose strength was equivalent to an ancient god's. This top-level fruit would not hurt her. The energy was enormous. At the same time, the effect was very obvious. In less than 10 seconds, Mother's body calmed down. Her deathly still face regained a bit of paleness. Although her aura was weak, it was much better than before. Looking at the obvious changes in his mother, Lin Feng let out a long sigh and calmed down. He knew that his mother had come back to life. The life force of a Saint King-level powerhouse was already very strong, not to mention that his mother's body was not injured at all. The attack of the illusion was mainly an attack on the soul, tormenting the mind. His mother was a super powerful being from the ancient family after all. Her soul was one of the most powerful beings in the entire Do spirit world, which was why she was able to escape death by sheer luck. The illusion was very scary, especially the endless illusion. No matter how strong a warrior's willpower was, they would not be able to withstand it. Everything was predestined. Luckily, Lin Feng secretly praised his luck. Fortunately, he did not give up. Step by step, he searched for his mother's whereabouts. In the end, his hard work finally paid off. If he had given up halfway, or if he had been late by even an hour or two, the outcome would have been different. At that time, no matter what he did, it would be useless. A dead person could not be revived. Half an hour later, whoosh! Jia Yaju's body trembled slightly. Her face regained its color, and she finally breathed. Lin Feng's long eyelashes fluttered. Looking at his mother, his heart could not help but beat faster. When he saw his mother weakly open her eyes and saw that weak but sun-like gaze, the last stone in his heart was lifted. Mother had finally woken up. Perhaps there would be some side effects, but these were not important. The most important thing was that his mother was alive. As long as she was alive, there would be endless hope. The side effects were not incurable. Even if it could not be cured in the Do Ling world, when he had enough strength in the future, he might be able to cure his mother when he entered the Starry Sky world. Moreover, his mother might not have any major side effects. Foner. The voice was very soft and gentle, but this time it was really called out. Jia Yaju opened her eyes and looked at her son. Warmth flowed through her heart. She was touched beyond words. After not seeing her for a long time, her son had grown into a true expert. Being able to enter here to save her was enough to prove everything. She was proud. She was proud of her son. As a mother, this was her greatest honor and her greatest achievement. Are you feeling better, mother? Lin Feng asked with concern. Actually, looking at the change in his mother's expression and feeling his mother's aura becoming stronger, he already knew. However, he still asked subconsciously. He wanted to know the answer in his heart. I'm fine. Jia Yaju smiled weakly. Her right wrist gently pushed against the ground, and she wanted to get up. Seeing this, Lin Feng exhaled and helped his mother up. He said softly, "Let's rest for a while more, mother." Jia Yaju slowly straightened her body. A faint light flashed through her eyes. I'm fine. Feng, we can't stay here for long. Let's go. Go. Lin Feng looked at his mother. He could not help but have a question in his heart. If he guessed correctly, this should be the death gate. How could they leave? Moreover, if his mother knew how to leave, why would she be in danger and almost die here? Lin Feng frowned slightly, unable to make heads or tails of the situation. As if seeing his doubts, Jiazhu smiled weakly. Let's talk as we walk. Lin Feng nodded, okay. Although her soul was seriously injured, after a short recovery, Jiazhu's physical condition was not bad. At least, she could move normally. Under the protection of Lin Feng's Pangu pupil, the surrounding illusions bloomed like fireworks. Everywhere they passed, it was quiet and calm. The so-called death gate seemed to not exist at all. There is no absolute death gate in a formation. The heavens are virtuous, and so are formations. Even the death gate will leave a chance for survival. Not to mention that this is not the death gate. His mother's gentle voice entered his ears. Lin Feng nodded. He knew this. Shun had taught him before. However, finding a flaw in the death gate was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. 10 people who entered the gate of death would all die, without a doubt. If this is not the death gate, then what is it? Lin Feng looked at his mother curiously. However, he felt that this place was becoming more and more mysterious. And his mother seemed to know a lot. Moreover, why did his mother come to Demon Emperor Island? There were many doubts in his heart. Chapter 1558. This array is called the Dual Emperor's Array, Jiazhu said softly. Dual Emperor's Array? Lin Feng's eyes lit up as he murmured in his heart. Jiazhu nodded and said softly, this array is quite special. It has the gate of 2 extremes. After entering it, you will find a path of 2 extremes very quickly. You have to choose one of the 2, but in fact, no matter which path you choose, the result will be the same. Lin Feng frowned as he pondered. Will they all enter here? Jiazhu shook her head and said softly, no, the choice is the same, but the gate of 2 extremes does have 2 extremes. Lin Feng was confused. Going back and forth in circles, he ended up making himself dizzy. The choice is the same, but not here? Then why is Mother here? What secret is hidden in this? Jiazhu smiled and said softly, the key of this array is the bloodline. Bloodline? Lin Feng was stunned. His eyes lit up as he murmured, Dual Emperor's Array. Could it be that only those with the bloodline of the demon race can enter the gate of 2 extremes? More or less. Jiazhu nodded, but the requirements are higher. To enter the other side of the gate of 2 extremes, not only must one have the bloodline of the demon race, one must also have the pure bloodline. No impurities are allowed to appear. I tried it before, but Jiazhu turned her head, and her eyes dimmed. She smiled faintly and said, I failed. I see. Lin Feng finally understood. It wasn't that he was lucky, but that no matter what he chose to do with the remaining 2 light spots, he would be entering the gate of death. He was the same as his mother. He did have the bloodline of a divine beast, but it was not pure. In essence, he and his mother belonged to the human race and not the demon race. The requirements of the Dual Emperor's Array were so harsh. Even if he had 100% of the Phoenix's inheritance, he would not be able to get through. Obviously, this array was much more difficult than the 5th layer. Then where are we going now, Mother? Lin Feng asked. Jiazhu's beautiful eyes flashed as she said softly, leave this place first, and then enter the gate of 2 extremes. Leave first? Try again. What was the difference in the outcome? Lin Feng looked at his mother, his mind filled with question marks. Since the requirements of the gate of 2 extremes were so harsh, would the results be different even if they tried 100 times or 1,000 times? With his and his mother's bloodline, it was impossible for them to enter the other extreme. But then again, what was in the other extreme that would make his mother take such a risk? Lin Feng was quite curious. Feng, did you receive my message? Is that why you came? Jiazhu asked softly. Yes. Lin Feng looked at his mother and said, Mother, you have been missing for some time. I was afraid that you would be in danger, so I hurried over. Fortunately, I came in time. letting out a sigh of relief. Lin Feng's expression slowly relaxed. To him, saving his mother was undoubtedly a great relief. Jia Yaju smiled. Actually, I didn't send you a message to ask for help. Lin Feng pursed his lips and smiled. I guessed it later. At that time, his mother's strength was above his. If his mother was really in great danger, she would definitely not ask him for help. If he rushed over because of this and failed to save her, he would lose his life. As a mother, how could she harm her son like that? Therefore, this request for help was self-contradictory. It was just that he was too nervous at that time, so he chose to ignore it, because his intuition told him that his mother was in danger. And the facts proved everything. But why did his mother send him a message? Actually, I sent you a message because I wanted you to come here and crack the gate of two extremes with me. Jia Yaju's eyes flickered. Although you and I don't have the bloodline of the demon race, there's another way to enter the other extreme of the gate of two extremes. That is, two people enter the gate of two extremes at the same time. Enter at the same time? Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He seemed to understand, but he did not. Slowly, he understood. Although the gate of two extremes was not distinguished by paths, but by bloodline, the existence of the gate of two extremes was definitely special. If it was really all determined by bloodline, why would there be a choice like the gate of two extremes? Wouldn't a single path be more direct and straightforward? There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. Zhu continued. When two people enter the gate of two extremes at the same time, because the two of them choose two different paths, the gate of two extremes of the two extremes monarch array will definitely be opened. Then, naturally, one of them will enter the other extreme, which is the extreme that only the experts with the bloodline of the demon race can enter. Lin Feng nodded in realization. At this moment, he finally understood why his mother sent him a message and the meaning behind her words. But mother, why did your message suddenly stop? Also, isn't this the residence of the demon race's commander? How could mother enter here without being discovered? Since he had spoken, Lin Feng naturally poured out all the questions of his mind. However, Jeju smiled and said, Don't worry, Feng. Listen to mother slowly. Soon, as the two of them walked, Jiayu told him what had happened during this period of time. Lin Feng was enlightened from time to time and nodded from time to time. The questions in his mind were finally answered. So that was it. That day, his mother did want to send a message to him, but she did not expect the sudden appearance of the great sage. The sudden change caught his mother off guard. In a moment of desperation, she risked everything. The most dangerous place was the safest place. Entering the two extremes monarch array, although it was outside the residence of the great sage, the location of the array was a special existence, and the outside world could not sense it. Like him, his mother had also entered the 5th level of the restriction. Her soul power had increased greatly, so she could enter the 6th level through the stairs. Although she understood the two extremes monarch array, out of confidence in her own strength and with a fluke mentality, his mother chose to enter the gate of two extremes. In the end, although she found the way out, her strength was too great, and she was getting weaker and weaker. Fortunately, Feng you came in time. Jia Yizhu turned her head and looked at Lin Feng, a satisfied brilliance flashing in her beautiful eyes. Born from luck, borrowing strength, Feng your pupils have broken through the cocoon and been reborn. The power of your soul has crossed a level, and your strength has increased greatly. It seems to have a natural restraint against illusions. Lin Feng also smiled with satisfaction and said softly, Yes, my strength has reached the starry sky level. I named it Pangu Pupil. Pangu Pupil? Jiaju's eyes lit up, and a slight smile bloomed on her face. As if she had understood something, she praised, Pangu Pupil is good. By the way, mother. Lin Feng suddenly remembered and could not help but ask curiously, Mother, you tried so hard to enter the other pole of the two extremes monarch array. What kind of noble existence is there in that pole? He really wanted to know what made his mother take such a big risk to enter it. Jiaju's eyes flickered slightly. After a pause, she said slowly, Feng, I won't hide it from you. That pole is very likely to hide the treasure that can revive your father. Chapter 1559. Shocking. Lin Feng's eyes changed instantly as he looked at his mother in shock. Although he had guessed it before, it was still shocking to hear it from his mother's mouth. Within the dual extreme monarch formation on the 6th layer of the Demon Monarch Island, there's actually a treasure that's capable of reviving father? Was it true? There was too much information. What treasure is it? Lin Feng was shocked for a while before he spoke. Jiayazhu raised her long eyelashes and her eyes shone. It's Star Origin stones, a large amount of them. Jiayazhu turned to look at Lin Feng and said slowly, Feng, since you mentioned it that day, I've traveled all over the inland area. Unfortunately, the inland area is too small. Even if there were treasures, they would have been excavated long ago. So, I didn't get much. Lin Feng nodded. He also thought about it later. Even though the wasteland world was vast and boundless, there were wizards and humans everywhere. Unlike the magical beasts of the demon race, the wizards and humans were races with intelligence. If there were any treasures in the wasteland world, they would have been excavated long ago. But the sea area was different. It was not only because the sea area was much bigger than the inland area, but also because most of the sea area was ownerless. Most of the demon beasts were concentrated in one area. In addition, the demon beasts that hadn't transformed had low intelligence and didn't know how to search for treasures. So, the chances of finding treasures in the sea area were much higher. Then, Jiayazhu's eyes shone faintly as if she was recalling something. I entered the Ancient Tribe's Divine Palace's database and read all kinds of ancient books. I even went deep into the territory of the wizard tribe to investigate. Finally, I found a secret. Secret? Lin Feng looked at his mother in surprise. If his mother called it a secret, it must be extraordinary. Yes, the secret of wizard coins. Jiayazhu nodded and looked at Lin Feng. Feng, you stayed in the wizard territory for a while. You should know about wizard coins, right? I know. Lin Feng nodded. How could I not know? In fact, he was now extremely wealthy and could be called the richest person in the sorcerer realm. Unfortunately, the amount of star origin energy required to restart the netherworld ship and revive his father was just too great. 5 billion wizard coins was only 1/10 of the required amount. After that, he stopped earning shaman coins. Because as far as he was concerned, no matter how he earned, he wouldn't be able to earn enough shaman coins in a short period of time to revive his father. This path would not work. But now, according to what Mother said, there seemed to be another side to it. The origin of shaman coins has been around for a long time. It can be traced back to before the first Great Shaman War. Jiayazhu's beautiful eyes flickered and said softly, at that time, the circulation of shaman coins was extremely large, and the shaman tribe was quite rich and could be said to be inexhaustible, but after the end of the First Great War of the Shamans, not only did the entire shaman tribe wither, their population plummeted by 80%, and even the shaman realm was occupied by the heavenly spirits. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. He already knew this part of history from the information in his mind. Indeed, the First Great War of the Shamans could be said to be the most intense battle after the battle between Pangu and the 3,000 demon gods. It was also a battle of strength after the true origin of the Doling world. In the end, no matter if it was the shaman tribe or the demon tribe, they did not gain the upper hand. Instead, the heavenly spirits who had been watching from the sidelines benefited from it, and the neutral tribes became popular. Until now, the heavenly spirits' influence in the Doling world was quite large. Not only did they occupy part of the shaman realm, they also had heavenly spirits' influence in the boundless ocean and could be said to be spread all over the Doling world. However, what did all of this have to do with the Star Origin Stone? I once spent half a month to investigate and calculate carefully, including the current heavenly spirits, the number of shaman tribe elites, the amount of shaman coins per person, and so on. Jiayazhu said slowly, compared to the shaman tribe before the First Great War of the Shamans, I discovered that the total amount of shaman coins had decreased by more than half. More than half. Lin Feng opened his eyes wide, and his heart was filled with astonishment. The difference of more than half was not a joke. It should be known that his mother had calculated the total amount of shaman coins in existence. Even though the shaman tribe elites who were ranked at the top of the list only had 10 billion shaman coins, if all the shaman coins were added up, let alone 10 billion, even 100 billion would be more than that. And the difference of more than half meant that more than 100 billion shaman coins were missing. Phew! Lin Feng let out a breath, and his chest heaved up and down slightly. His heart was beating wildly. This discovery was too shocking. If there really was more than 100 billion shaman coins, then restarting the Netherworld ship would be a piece of cake, and there would not be any obstacles. Not to mention 100 billion shaman coins. Even if there was only half of it, 50 billion shaman coins would be more than enough. However, was there really such a thing? Shaman coins would not disappear for no reason. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. The pure star origin energy contained in them is not something an ordinary warrior could absorb, and it would not be easily destroyed. That's right. Ezra nodded and said, hence, I speculated that they might have been hidden. Hidden? Lin Feng was shocked. He looked at his mother, and the figure of Shaman Emperor Jiang suddenly appeared in his mind. That day, he did not even blink when he bought the Astral treasure puppet from him. He was very rich. Then, could it be that the one who hid the shaman coins was him? No, it can't be him. Lin Feng immediately denied it. According to his mother, it happened during the First Great Shaman War, and at that time, the 12 shaman ancestors had all died in battle. Shaman Emperor Jiang only showed his talent during the Second Great Shaman War. The timing did not match. But if it was not him, who could it be? Lin Feng's expression was serious. He frowned slightly, and his heartbeat quickened. His eyes became brighter and brighter, and the thoughts in his mind slowly became clear. Could it be Hua? Lin Feng's eyes brightened, and he looked at his mother. The latter was also looking at him with a faint smile. Their eyes met, and their thoughts were the same at this moment. Lin Feng's expression kept changing, and he said in surprise, "So, Mother, you think that the missing shaman coins were hidden by the demon clan? The possibility is more than 80%. Jiazhu nodded, and her voice was gentle but firm. Back then, before the Heavenly Spirit Continent was established, the shaman tribe and the demon clan were the strongest. Although the shaman tribe had the help of the ancient tribe and the human clan, the demon clan was huge in number, and the shaman tribe did not have the upper hand. They could be said to be evenly matched, and both sides had their wins and losses. The shaman coins are dead objects. At that time, the shaman tribe had a large number of shaman coins, and they could not be used up. It is very likely that after a great defeat, countless of them were plundered by the demon clan. This caused the shaman coins to decrease greatly, and less than half of them were left. Jia Yaju explained softly, and Lin Feng could not help but nod. His mother's deduction was reasonable, and the possibility was very high when he thought about it carefully. Plundering was a subconscious action. Perhaps the Star Origin Stone was not very useful to the Demon Clan, but if the Demon Clan defeated the Shaman tribe that day, it would be a waste not to take it. To the Demon Clan, it was equivalent to a war trophy. If the Demon Clan took this huge batch of war trophies and could not use them, now, this batch of war trophies was very likely still being kept. Bang! Bang! His heartbeat quickened, and Lin Feng could not help but clench his fists. Hope rose in his heart. So, Mother, you found this place. This is the place where the Demon Clan hid the war trophies for back then? Lin Feng looked forward and pursed his lips tightly. He had worked so hard for so long, and he had almost died a few times. However, at this moment, he felt that all the hard work was worth it. If he could obtain a large amount of shaman coins, because of this, there was a high chance that his father would be resurrected. The possibility is more than 70%. Jiaju's beautiful eyes flickered, and she said softly, I have searched many Demon Clan territories, and the place where the trophies from back then were hidden is most likely Demon Royal Island. The first 5 layers of restrictions belong to the cultivation category, and only the 6th and 7th layers of restrictions are extremely mysterious. The possibility is the highest. Lin Feng nodded enthusiastically. The possibility of the seventh layer of restrictions was obviously smaller than the sixth layer. After all, until now, there was no powerhouse in the entire demon clan who had the ability to enter the seventh layer of restrictions. Even the great sage himself believed that he did not have the ability to do so. Therefore, the possibility of these trophies that could be used at any time being placed in the sixth layer of restrictions was much higher than the seventh layer of restrictions. As for the other side of the dual extreme Emperor formation, only powerhouses with pure demon clan bloodline could enter. Everything was like an arrow pointing to something, and it was getting clearer and clearer. Leave. Lin Feng looked at his mother, and he was rather surprised. After going around in circles, his mother quickly brought him out of the gate of death and returned to the dual extreme Emperor formation. It did not take much time. Because of the advancement of my soul and the breakthrough of my strength, I was too confident and underestimated this dual extreme Emperor formation. Jiayuzhu smiled slightly with a hint of self-mockery as she looked at Lin Feng. Fortunately, Fenger, you arrived in time. I'm afraid that I wouldn't be able to save the situation in half an hour. It was also a coincidence. Lin Feng smiled. Everything was fated, and his mother's life was not meant to end. Mother, bring me to the path of two extremes later, and you can leave first. Lin Feng hesitated and said softly. His mother's body had just recovered a bit of vitality, and he did not want her to tire herself out. Moreover, there was a possibility of entering either side of the path of two extremes. If his mother entered the gate of death again, she would definitely be injured. Regardless of whether it was his original body or his avatar, they both had sufficient strength. Jia Yaju's beautiful eyes flickered as she looked at Lin Feng. She smiled and nodded without any objection. Since they were mother and son, there was no need to be modest. She knew her own body's condition. Instead of fighting on the front line, it was better to hand the heavy responsibility to her son so that she would not be a burden to him. Moreover, Jiayaju was very satisfied with Lin Feng's current strength. The current Lin Feng had already surpassed his master. Moving forward, under Jiayaju's lead, the road ahead was soon flat, and a few faint flashes of light could be seen. Lin Feng's eyes instantly lit up. Just as he was about to speak, a sudden change occurred. A huge energy suddenly appeared without any warning, destroying the world. Roar! A violent and angry voice broke through the sky, causing the earth to tremble violently. Even though he was in the dual extreme Emperor formation, Lin Feng could hear it clearly. His expression changed drastically in an instant, and he clenched his fists tightly. He was back. Before New Year's Day, enter the state of madness. I don't ask for monthly votes. I only want to atone for my laziness these days. Chapter 1560. The great sage had returned. With a heart full of anger and a fully fused heavenly treasure, he descended, returning to Demon Emperor Island. At this moment, Lin Feng was filled with mixed feelings and indescribable bitterness. Although he had saved his mother, the current situation was a mess, and he was in a dilemma. It was not difficult for him to leave. His clone was not on Demon Emperor Island at the moment. As long as his clone summoned his main body, he could leave instantly. Even if the great sage was furious, he could not do anything to him. But what about his mother? How could he leave his mother alone here? No matter how well he hid, he could not stop the furious great sage from digging 3 feet into the ground to search for him. Once he was discovered, the consequences could be imagined. Even if he had to give up his life, he would not do such a thing. As a son, how could he let his mother face such a terrifying existence alone? Wow! Jia Yaju's beautiful eyes lit up. She did not make a sound and only looked at her son quietly. She knew Lin Feng's character. Naturally, she would not say things like telling Lin Feng to leave her alone and run for his life, because in her opinion, these were all nonsense. Lin Feng's character was the same as his father's. He was stubborn and principled. Even if he had to sacrifice himself, he would not let her harm a single hair on his head. At this moment, instead of saying these meaningless words, it was better to let Lin Feng calm down and have more time to think. Perhaps would there be a perfect solution? But was there really? Yes, of course there was. Lin Feng knew very well that the great sage's target was only him. There was a 90% chance that he did not know about his mother's existence. If he could give up on entering the gate of two extremes, then as long as he attracted the enemy's attention, the possibility of him and his mother escaping was still very high. But could he give up? If he gave up now, when would the next opportunity come? The situation was changing rapidly. Today, there were spoils of war in the 6th level, but it was not certain in the future. Once the demon race was vigilant, it would not be difficult to strengthen the defense. It was also very likely that they would move the spoils of war away. If he missed this opportunity, he might not get another one. Choice. Now, it was time for him to make a choice. Even if his heart ached, he had to give up one. However, they were all unwilling to part with her. Damn it, if I had even the time for half an incense stick to burn, it would be enough. Lin Feng clenched his fists tightly as he thought to himself that the opportunity had passed by in an instant. Yet the heavens didn't bless him and caused him to fail at the last step. Although he really wanted to save his father, and he didn't know when the next time would come if he missed this opportunity, the most important thing right now was to save his mother's life. As for saving his father, he could only think of a way in the future. However, it wouldn't be easy to bring his mother out unscathed under the great sage's nose. With mother's strength, if she could sneak in without making a sound, she could also sneak out without making a sound. However, mother was currently heavily injured and had less than 1/10 of her strength left. This was also a troublesome matter. Boom! Rumble! Outside the Demon Emperor Island, the sounds of explosions resounded in the air as thunderous roars pierced the ears. It was easy to imagine how furious the great sage was. He had come straight to Demon Emperor Island. Clearly, he already knew where Yi Futian was. After all, it could be said that he'd brazenly barged into Demon Emperor Island, and it wasn't a secret that countless experts of the Demon Clan had witnessed it with their own eyes. Come! Lin Feng's eyes opened slightly. At this moment, he had already made up his mind. All the experts of the Demon Clan had seen him enter the 5th level of Demon Emperor Island. The great sage would definitely enter the 5th level to search for him. As long as he could pin down the great sage, his doppelganger would be able to bring his mother out of here. As long as he wasn't locked on by the great sage's aura, with the doppelganger's speed, the great sage would definitely not be able to catch up to him. As for the safety of his main body, it was no longer within his consideration. Whether he lived or died, it would be up to the heavens to decide. Phew! Lin Feng let out a long breath and made his final decision. His gaze fell into the distance. At this moment, the gate of two extremities was faintly visible. Although he had failed at the last step, he had to prioritize the overall situation. Gritting his teeth, Lin Feng felt somewhat helpless. Just as he was about to take action, suddenly, wait. Lin Feng was slightly startled. His eyes lit up. He seemed to have forgotten something. Spiritual item. I'm so stupid. Lin Feng smiled. However, the danger came too quickly and he couldn't react in time. He had Yi, Hong Ling, and the 100 poison-colored python. All of them were at the saint level. As long as he sent Yi and Hong Ling in, one of them would definitely be able to enter the other side of the gate of two extremities. However, once they enter the gate of death, both Yi and Hong Ling will definitely die. Lin Feng frowned slightly. It was the same for the 100 poison-colored python. Although it had the constitution of a demon beast, its bloodline was no longer pure. To be precise, it had already become an artifact spirit. If he allowed them to enter the gate of two extremities, one of them would definitely be sacrificed. Both of them had gone through hardships together. No matter which one of them was sacrificed, he couldn't bear it. Lin Feng was shocked. As if he had thought of something, he was instantly overjoyed. Ha ha! Laughing heartily, Lin Feng looked at his mother. His eyes were shining brightly. Quick, mother. Let's go to the gate of two extremities. We still have time. Jia Yaju's beautiful eyes flashed slightly. Although she was puzzled, she didn't ask. She only made a soft sound of acknowledgement and then rushed forward. Lin Feng followed, with his mother leading the way. The illusions quickly broke through one after another. After passing through all the obstacles, the illusions in front of them disappeared like a mirage. The gate of two extremities, emitting a strange aura, suddenly appeared. They had arrived. It was as if he could hear the furious roars of the great sage in his ears. However, at this moment, Lin Feng didn't care at all. There was no turning back. Since he had already come this far, he had to continue walking. Come out, refined puppet. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. With a thought, a familiar aura appeared out of nowhere and appeared in an instant. It was a man with a black demonic aura. His body was covered in dragon tattoos. His expression was serious, and he had a calm temperament. The Black Mist demonic dragon clan, refined puppet. Master, refined puppet bowed and said respectfully, "We don't have much time. Refined puppet, I'll leave it to you," Lin Feng said slowly, his eyes bright. There is no need for more words. A contracted magical beast and its master's heart were connected. Refined puppet knew very well what to do. To him, this mission was very important. Within that serious expression was a pair of wise and determined eyes. He had always felt that he owed his master. As a contracted magical beast, he had never helped his master, not even once. Therefore, he had always been quietly cultivating, patiently waiting for his master's orders. Now, refined puppet was a saint-level being. Whoosh! Like a bolt of lightning, refined puppet didn't waste any time and directly entered the gate of two extremities. Watching the disappearing figure, Lin Feng's eyes flashed. There was no need to worry. Refined puppet's bloodline was very pure. The Black Mist demonic dragon clan was, without a doubt, a Yao. When he first took refined puppet as his contracted magical beast, he didn't think so much. In fact, there were many Black Mist demonic dragons with better aptitudes than refined puppet. However, refined puppet was very smart, smarter than all the other Black Mist demonic dragons. Later on, he showed perseverance. The facts proved that his judgment was right. Although the early stages of cultivation were very difficult, after reaching the Star Lord level, refined puppet's strength improved by leaps and bounds. Now, he had surpassed the 100 poison-colored python and caught up. With the quality and characteristics he had, he would definitely be able to stand alone in the future. He would definitely become a great person. He definitely wasn't wrong. Moreover, he believed that refined puppet would be able to complete the mission perfectly, as long as there was a star origin stone inside the gate of two extremities. Roar! The roar was getting closer and closer. Lin Feng's eyes also retracted from the gate of two extremities. The great sage had arrived. He entered the 6th level of Demon Emperor Island at an extremely fast speed. As if he knew where he was, he broke through without hesitation. Not only was his fighting spirit boiling, but his murderous aura was also incisive. Phew! Exhaling a long breath, Lin Feng's eyes were cold. What was to come would come. He couldn't avoid what he had to face. He had to face it. The battle with the great sage was unavoidable. Whoosh! Lin Feng's body split into two. The main body and the clone appeared at the same time. They had almost the same face, but they had different temperaments. One was as tough as iron, holding the doomsday spear, surrounded by golden light, like a god of war. The other was surrounded by flames. The phoenix star seal on his forehead flashed, and he had a pair of eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. Both the main body and the clone were now standing at the peak of the Douling world. They were true experts. "Don't worry, mother. I will be fine." Lin Feng smiled faintly, the phoenix star seal on his forehead flashing. Both the main body and the clone had no chance of winning against the great sage. However, the main body still had a slight chance, and that was the Pangu eyes that he had just broken through. Even Lin Feng himself didn't know how strong a heavenly soul master was. He didn't know if he could fight against the great sage. However, there was one thing he was sure of. The main body could definitely restrain the great sage. As long as the main body could restrain the great sage, even if it was just a short 10 seconds, it would be enough for the clone to take his mother away. With the clone's speed, even if it consumed a lot of energy, the other demon experts wouldn't be able to catch up to it. When the time came, his mother would be able to escape. As for the survival of the main body, it would depend on the will of the heavens. In a dazzling golden palace, Lin Feng stood in the palace, floating in midair with a calm expression. This was the residence of the great sage, and his mark existed. That was why he knew his whereabouts. The dual emperor formation was very complicated. His mother and clone were now in the path of two extremes. It wouldn't be easy to find them. With the great sage's personality, he probably wouldn't look for his clone. After all, he had suffered a great loss before. It's here. Lin Feng's eyes flashed, and his heart skipped a beat. Outside the palace, the majestic aura had yet to arrive, but a terrifying pressure had already descended. We haven't even fought yet, and you're already trying to intimidate me? Lin Feng smiled and didn't care. The biggest taboo in a battle was to give in before the battle and lose confidence. Perhaps he wasn't a match for the great sage, but it wouldn't be that easy to kill him. Come. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Even if I die, I will make you pay a heavy price. His voice was loud and clear, echoing in the palace. The demon language had a unique melody. In front of the palace, a golden figure arrived, holding an earth pillar. His eyes were cold. The great sage had arrived. Chapter 1561. This was an unavoidable battle. Lin Feng was well aware of how powerful the great sage was. This time, he wasn't just guessing. He'd actually fought him face to face twice. Great sages were already incredibly powerful, let alone great sages who had perfectly fused with heavenly treasures. If the shield of truth hadn't been damaged, he might have been able to fight a heavenly treasure against a heavenly treasure. But now, he was afraid he'd be throwing an egg at a rock. Ha ha ha! The great sage raised his head and laughed. His eyes flashed, and his laughter was full of contempt. As he saw it, Lin Feng was just bluffing to scare him. Even if he died, he'd make him pay a heavy price? What a joke. Who was he? He was the strongest of the Yao clan. He looked down on even the 4 Yao emperors, much less a mere human. Lin Feng stood there calmly, the flame burning fiercely. He didn't attack, nor did he defend. He just watched quietly, waiting. Time was very important. To him, the most important thing was to buy enough time for his doppelganger and mother to escape. Everything else didn't matter now. At this point, his main body was ready to throw caution to the wind. Even if he died here, he'd have no regrets. At least he'd profited. His eyes flashed. His doppelganger sent him a message. He and his mother were already searching for an exit, preparing to escape. Before long, they'd be able to leave the dual emperor's formation. Not running anymore. The great sage's golden light flashed. His eyes sparkled. The pillar in his hand trembled, forming a sealed area around him. Space trembled, completely sealing off the entire area. It was the superpower of a heavenly treasure. How cautious. Once bitten, twice shy. The great sage had learned a lot this time. In reality, he'd never been stupid. Anyone who could become the strongest of the Yao clan couldn't be a fool. The reason he'd been thwarted time and time again, falling for Lin Feng's schemes, was because he was inexperienced and his opponent was too cunning. But this time, he'd sealed off the area. Victory was already in his hands. To him, this human before him was no different from a corpse. He just had to wait and see when he could kill him. I'm not running anymore, Lin Feng said indifferently, his eyes flashing. He could clearly sense the changes in the surrounding space. The great saint of the Ursa major constellation had a good grasp of the way of space. He was only slightly weaker than the witch Emperor Jiang. However, ever since that battle, he believed that the great saint had been trying his best to make up for his weakness. In the previous battle, he knew that the great saint's understanding of the way of space was already very strong. At least, it was better than his own. Now he was able to use the earth pillar and unleash the space Tao, like a fish in water. The surrounding space was completely locked down. If he wanted to break out of this space and leave, then he would have to go through the great sage first. It was too difficult. As expected, Lin Feng thought to himself. Fortunately, his doppelganger had not been provoked to chase after the earth pillar. Otherwise, his doppelganger would not have been able to escape no matter how fast it was. The heavenly treasures were indeed extraordinary. The heavenly ark had perfectly unleashed the shaman Emperor Zhong's most powerful ability, and the earthen pillar had not only become the great sage's most powerful weapon, it had also made up for his only weakness. The great sage now had no blind spots. Lin Feng breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. There was no way out. At this moment, he was completely relaxed, but he was also curious. If the great sage and shaman Emperor Zhong were to fight again, who would be the final winner? He did not know, but it was not important to him. What was important was the present, his own situation. Human, you have tarnished the name of a warrior. The great sage's eyes sparkled with cold light. Originally, if you could fight me fair and square, perhaps I would be merciful and let you live. The great sage's eyes shone with an ominous glint, his battle intent radiating. But you have gone too far. Whoosh, after he finished speaking, the earthen pillar suddenly rose with a clang. An enormous amount of heaven and earth energy appeared, causing the entire space to tremble violently. The heavenly treasure's true power had been revealed. The great sage at this moment was completely different from the great sage who had fought Lin Feng for the first time. It was like the difference between a swordsman wielding a sword and a bare-handed swordsman. The Starry Sky Realm staff technique concept, coupled with the power of the heavenly treasures. Even if he did not use any moves, a casual wave of his staff had already exceeded the Do Ling world's endurance. His aura completely suppressed Lin Feng. The great sage was a true warrior. He revered the strong as his foundation. Therefore, to him, everything Lin Feng had done before was an insult to the name of a warrior. Power surged out, no longer hiding. This battle was unavoidable, and in fact, Lin Feng had never thought of running away. A message from his doppelganger appeared in his mind. Lin Feng's lips curled into a faint smile. He relaxed and clenched his fists slightly. His heart focused, and the blood in his body flowed at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, it was as if he had returned to the fifth layer of the seal. The vast star pupil and vast star pupil evolved. In an instant, Lin Feng's body seemed to overlap with Pangu's. The vague image of a giant appeared, and the enormous power of heaven and the soul completely condensed. In this unique space, it seemed to have turned from nothingness into reality, causing the earthen pillar in the great sage's hand to tremble slightly. Oh! The great sage was shocked. He didn't expect this insignificant human strength to be able to shake the earthen pillar. Before he had time to react, a sound suddenly rang in his ears. The great sage immediately sensed it. His eyes widened, and he turned to look at the two extreme monarchs' formation. His face turned pale with fright. The sudden turn of events caused him to be subconsciously distracted, and at this moment he was distracted. It was very fatal. Chance! Lin Feng's eyes instantly lit up. Who was he? How many times had he experienced life and death battles? How many times had he hovered on the edge of death? How many times had he escaped from seemingly impossible battles? It wasn't just luck that he relied on. It was strength, extraordinary battle instincts, and the belief that he would never give up. Pangu pupil, vermilion bird attack. Lin Feng roared. All of his strength was focused on the pupil, and he attacked with all his might. The Pangu pupil shone with an intense light. It was the first time after the transformation that it exploded with true power. The soul power in his mind poured out like a tide, completely converging into a fiery red vermilion bird. Vermilion bird attack. It was different from any other vermilion bird attack in the past. It was no longer a vermilion bird, but a giant phoenix. No, a vermilion bird. The real vermilion bird of the primordial divine beast had materialized from the power of the starry sky. As soon as the terrifying aura appeared, the entire space shook violently. The The spatial restraint formed by the earthen pillar was directly shattered. The power was too terrifying. 15%, 20%, 25%, 30%. Lin Feng clenched his teeth and unleashed all of his power. Unlike the vast star pupil and the vast star pupil, the Pangu pupil was terrifyingly powerful, and its soul power was incredibly strong. Back then, the vermilion bird attack could release 50% of his soul power, and he still had some energy left. But now, he could only release 30% of his soul power, and it had already exhausted all of Lin Feng's strength. But was 30% the same as 50% the same? The difference was like heaven and earth. The outbreak begins. Next chapter, 1300 hours. Chapter 1562. Lin Feng had unleashed his full power. In a situation where the great sage had not anticipated at all, he had directly and unreasonably erupted, revealing his only trump card. Roar! With a furious roar, the great sage, who had regained his senses, instinctively blocked the attack. The earth pillar emitted a dazzling golden energy, and the rich power of heaven and earth, accompanied by the great sage's star source energy, condensed into a beam of intense light that shot straight at the fiery red vermilion bird. His reaction was extremely fast. However, how could this last-minute counterattack compare to Lin Feng's attack? The great sage had underestimated his opponent. Boom! The power of the vermilion bird was boundless. The beam of light that shot out from the earth pillar was instantly swallowed up as if it was engulfed in flames. The fiery red vermilion bird let out a high-pitched cry. Amidst the great sage's horrified expression, the vermilion bird smashed into the earth pillar as if it was crushing dry weeds. Boom! The light was huge, and the impact of the energy was extremely terrifying, affecting the entire hall. Rumble! Rumble! The surrounding space was completely broken, and the entire hall was on the verge of collapse, as if there was an earthquake, and rubble was all over the ground. No one knew that at this moment, on the 6th level of Demon Emperor Island, the most powerful battle in the Douling world was erupting. Human Emperor against Demon Emperor. Who was stronger? The answer was obvious. With Lin Feng's current strength, he was still not strong enough to compete with the Great Sage. However, a battle did not rely purely on strength. There were many other factors, such as the right time, the right place, the right people, and the state of both sides during the battle, improvisation, and so on. A large part of these were what Lin Feng was good at, and what the Great Sage lacked. Experience. Countless life and death battles had forged Lin Feng's steel-like will and spirit of never giving up. At this moment, the Emperor's Star of the human clan was ignited. Wizard Tribe Realm, Ancestral Magi Palace. Wizard Emperor Dejong had his hands behind his back, and his chaotic face looked at the vast starry sky, his eyes flashing. Human Emperor Lin Feng, Demon Emperor Great Sage, Dejong murmured, as if he meant something. In the starry sky, the two Emperor's stars were boundless, covering the light of all the other stars, including the huge star that represented Dejong. However, the expression on Dejong's face didn't seem to care at all. Instead, he raised the corner of his mouth as if this was good news for him. The battle between the emperors will not end until one of us is dead. Only one can survive. I never thought that Lin Feng would be able to reach this step. Not long ago, the Demon Emperor's star was dazzling. It should have reached a higher level of enlightenment. It's very likely that it had fused with a heavenly treasure, but I didn't expect Lin Feng to be able to shake it. Not bad at all. Dejong nodded in satisfaction. As far as he was concerned, there was only one enemy, and that was the great saint of the demonic race. As for Lin Feng, he had never taken him seriously because he knew very well that in a battle between two emperors, one of them would die. Although Lin Feng had great potential, he had started too late, and his talent was limited. There was no way he could compete with the great saint. Furthermore, how could a mere human be a match for the sorcerer tribe? In his eyes, Lin Feng was just a chess piece, an insignificant chess piece. Although you can't win, but if you can help me severely injure the great saint and pave the way for the sorcerer tribe, when the sorcerer tribe unifies the Douling world, I, Dijiang, might be merciful and let you ants live as slaves. Ha ha! He laughed wantonly. Dijiang's eyes were filled with coldness and dominance. He would never show any mercy. The development of the situation was completely within his expectations. Although there were setbacks in the beginning of the battle between the sorcerer tribe and the demon emperor, after some adjustments, the sorcerer tribe had turned the situation around bit by bit. Although they had not gained the upper hand yet, at least they were evenly matched. When the time came, as long as he could defeat the great saint, the sorcerer tribe would be completely in his favor. He was determined to unify the Douling world. Hua! Dijiang's eyes were shining with ambition. He looked at the starry sky, at the star of the human tribe that represented Lin Feng, and waited for it to slowly extinguish. He nodded slowly. His heart was very calm. He was very satisfied with the result. He did not need Lin Feng to defeat the great saint, nor did he think about it at all. In his opinion, this was something that would never happen. As long as Lin Feng could injure the great saint, he would be able to take advantage of the situation and clean up the mess. Do you think that I won't come looking for you if you hide on Demon Emperor Island? Dijiang sneered coldly. Heavenly unique treasures had senses. When the three of them were in one body, they would be able to sense the location of the other two treasures. Lin Feng did not know, but Dijiang knew. These three heavenly treasures were precious treasures left behind by his ancestors, the 12 ancestors of the sorcerer tribe. Therefore, he did not need to fight for them that day, because he knew that the treasures had spirits and would protect the sorcerer tribe. As for the great saint, he thought that he had obtained a treasure, but was that really the case? Success is because of the earth pillar. Failure is also because of the earth pillar. Do you think that heavenly treasures are so easy to subdue? Great saint, you are too naive, too childish. All of this is just a trap. Stupid sorcerer tribe. Dijiang's eyes brightened as he said coldly. In terms of scheming and cunning, who in the entire Douling world could compare to him? If he wanted to take the earth pillar, how could he let the great saint have it? How could he have given him a heavenly treasure out of kindness? It was impossible for the sorcerer tribe's treasure to fuse with the sorcerer tribe's treasure, but to force it, it would consume a lot of soul energy and a lot of time. All of this was worth it to the great saint, but to Dijiang, it was purely a waste of time. Go and refine it. You will find that it's all for nothing in the end. Also, humph. Dijiang's voice was cold. The only thing that surprised him was that the great saint took much longer to fuse with the earth pillar than he had expected. He thought that the great saint would need at least half a year to a year. This period of time was enough for him to pave the way for the sorcerer tribe, build a good foundation, and even establish the rhythm of victory. However, plans often could not keep up with changes. Fine. What we lose on the swings, we gain on the roundabouts. As long as Lin Feng can hurt the great saint, coupled with the fact that he will lose a lot of power after forcefully fusing with the earth pillar, I am confident that I will kill him. Dijiang's lips curled up coldly. He looked at the bright stars in the sky as the two emperors' stars competed, patiently waiting for the end. However, in an instant, the changes in the stars made Dijiang speechless, and he was stunned on the spot. Impossible! How is this possible? Dijiang was completely dumbfounded. He couldn't believe it. At this moment, although the Emperor's star of the human race representing Lin Feng was slowly dimming, the Emperor's star of the demon race representing the great saint was dimming faster than the Emperor's star of the human race. It lost its light and vitality bit by bit. Soon, the Sorcerer Emperor's star was completely dim and lifeless, as if it had died. Dijiang was completely stunned. Chapter 1563. In the end, it was too unexpected. Dijiang couldn't figure out why the Demon Emperor's star, who represented the Great Saint, would die. What exactly happened? The Great Saint died in Lin Feng's hands? How is that possible? Impossible. Dijiang instantly denied it. From what he knew, the Great Saint and Lin Feng were too weak. Even he wasn't confident that he could win against the Great Saint at his peak. The Great Saint was the most powerful being in the history of the demon clan, the most terrifyingly talented expert. In terms of talent, he even surpassed the 3,000 demon gods. That was why he set up this trap. However, he couldn't react in time. It was as if he was struck by lightning. Ha! Ha! Di Jiang laughed. There was a hint of mockery in his laughter. He was speechless and kept shaking his head. Even he couldn't explain what he was feeling. He felt like he had set up a trap for no reason. In the end, he realized that he had been fooled by the heavens. The Great Saint, the demon commander, the strongest demon clan, died just like that, killed by a mere human? What a joke. Although only one of the two emperors died, it couldn't be the demon emperor who died. After a long time. Interesting. Too interesting. Di Jiang laughed out loud, without any scruples. His laughter echoed in the entire Ancestor Magi Palace. His voice was so loud that it seemed like a water source that had been blocked for a long time suddenly burst out. Di Jiang's laughter was indescribably joyful. Although the development of the situation was unexpected and could even be said to be completely out of control. What did he lose? What did the Wizard clan lose? Nothing at all. The Great Saint's death gave him a lot of energy to reflect on himself. Very good. Lin Feng, well done. Di Jiang's eyes flashed with a cold, killing intent. He sneered, well done. You helped me solve a big problem. To thank you, I'll leave your corpse intact. Want an arrogance. To Di Jiang, no one in the Douling world could stop him now that the Great Saint was dead. Lin Feng? Naturally, he wouldn't let them live, and he would use the fastest speed to exterminate them. Today, Lin Feng could kill the Great Saint, and he might be able to do the same in the future. Di Jiang would never be soft-hearted. Either he wouldn't do it, or he would be straightforward and cut the weeds to the roots. Lin Feng, wait for me. Di Jiang's eyes flashed, and his voice was bone-chilling. What happened? What was going on with the battle between Lin Feng and the Great Sage? Was the Great Sage really dead? You won? Lin Feng stood there in a daze, his entire being a little dazed. He couldn't believe that he had won just like that. However, the Great Sage in front of him really had no aura left and had been destroyed in body and soul. It was as if a war god had fallen. His sturdy body seemed to have been refined from steel. Even though he had died, there was not the slightest bit of damage. There was not even a trace of blood on his body. However, his widened eyes were dim and had lost all luster. The Great Sage was indeed dead. Just as the star that represented the Demon Emperor had fallen, the Great Sage's death had become a reality. I actually won. Lin Feng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fate made fools of people. He had only wanted to stall for time, and he had only wanted to die together so that his doppelganger and mother could safely escape. He had never thought that he could defeat the Great Sage, let alone defeat him face to face. This was a mission that he had thought was completely impossible, but now he had inexplicably accomplished it. His eyes flashing, Lin Feng looked forward, and his eyes were a little dazed. Just now, roar! The Great Sage's furious voice still echoed in his ears. He was hysterical and furious, like an injured beast. His eyes were red, and blood could even seep out. There was no doubt about the power of Pangu's eye. Even if it was only 30% of his soul power, it was still much, much stronger than the previous 50%. However, this was still not enough to kill the Great Sage. Lin Feng was very clear about this. As a heavenly soul master, how could he not understand the strength of his enemy's soul? Although he had used up a lot of soul power to fuse with the heavenly treasure, the Great Sage's remaining soul power was at least on the same level as his. Otherwise, how could he have fused with such a powerful heavenly treasure? His talent was already extraordinary, and the Great Sage had definitely entered the 5th layer of the Demon Emperor Island. In terms of soul power, the Great Sage was not inferior to any expert in the Douling world. Moreover, his Vermilion Bird attack had only injured the Great Sage. Even if it was an all-out attack, he had only wanted to delay the Great Sage so that his doppelganger and mother could successfully escape. Lin Feng's eyes blurred, and the scenes of the previous battle appeared in his mind. Now that he had calmed down, every detail and every scene of the battle was like a replay, slowly appearing in front of his eyes. It was incomparably clear. 31%, 32%. Lin Feng gritted his teeth so hard that blood came out. He had completely gone crazy. The first vermilion bird attack, which contained 30% of soul power, was blasted out. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no reaction, he quickly followed up with a second vermilion bird attack. He was fighting without any regard for his life. He was going all out, and the terrifying soul power caused the entire palace to collapse. His soul power had already condensed into a physical form. How powerful and terrifying was that? The fiery red vermilion bird was like a blood-stained phoenix as it charged forward. It was as resolute as Lin Feng's will as it charged straight into the depths of the great sage's soul. There was no way to block it. When a heavenly soul master was determined to destroy everything, whether it was a heavenly soul master or a heavenly soul master, it was difficult to resist this terrifying power. A direct attack from the soul. It was an unreasonable fighting style and a desperate attack. Roar! Roar! The great sage was hysterical, and his face was deathly pale. Even if his soul power was far stronger than Lin Feng's, fusing with the earth pillar consumed a lot of soul power. He hadn't had time to recover yet, so he couldn't display his original strength in this battle. All he could do was defend. His soul felt like it was being torn apart, and the pain was shocking. However, this was not the end. Lin Feng's third soul attack came. Vermilion bird assault. Lin Feng was throwing caution to the wind. It was as if he had squeezed every last bit of soul power out of his body. Pangazai, 33% of his soul power. All of his soul power was poured into this attack. 3 soul attacks, a total of 95% of his soul power. If not for the vermilion bird assault, just the reaction force alone would have been enough to kill Lin Feng several times over. A heavenly soul master's attacks were completely unreasonable, and there was no way to block them. Only the soul could fight in the most direct way possible, and the great sage did manage to block it. Even if he was exhausted, even if he was on the verge of collapse, the great sage's soul power was still a level higher than Lin Feng's. His body trembled violently, but he stood tall and proud. His eyes seemed to spit fire, but he was still standing. "I lost," Lin Feng murmured softly. The scene in his mind was very clear. At that time, he had used up a lot of soul power, and his attention was focused on the battle, so he did not notice it. But now, he could clearly see that even if he used all of his soul power in his last attack, he was still unable to kill the great sage. There were pros and cons. Although the vermilion bird assault did not have any reaction force, its attack power was still inferior to the attacks of other heavenly soul masters. There were pros and cons. Soul power attacks consumed a lot of soul power. When the attack entered the body of another martial artist, it would consume a lot of soul power. And when the attack was inside the martial artist's body, it would also consume a lot of soul power. In addition, soul attacks did not have the geographical advantage, so the Heavenly Soul Master's attack was actually an attack with a lower level of soul power. Even if he used the Vermilion Bird Assault 3 times in a row and used up 95% of his soul power, at most, I could only heavily injure him, Lin Feng thought to himself as he nodded his head. Strength was definitely not enough to kill the great sage. But then what happened? Whoosh! Light shone. Lin Feng's eyes widened. It was the earth pillar, the light of the earth pillar. When the earth pillar shone, the great sage's expression suddenly changed. His entire body trembled, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. His hands, which were holding onto the earth pillar, were trembling violently. Upon closer inspection, it was as if there was a suction force that was firmly holding onto his hands. This was backlash. Lin Feng was greatly shaken. He was overwhelmed with shock. The earth pillar's backlash? That's right. He was not seeing things. Lin Feng felt his mouth go dry. Light flashed in his hand, and another sparkling and translucent astral fruit fell into his stomach. These extremely precious astral fruits contained a lot of energy, and they replenished his soul power. Although they could not replenish his soul power, At least his soul power could be maintained at a normal state, and he would not faint. Whoosh! Whoosh! Scene after scene appeared in front of his eyes. Lin Feng pursed his lips. He confirmed it once again. He was not seeing things. The great sage had indeed died from the earth pillar's backlash. He was wronged. More than wronged. It was laughable. He had expended a tremendous amount of effort to fuse with the heavenly treasure, and in the end, he had achieved a perfect fusion. But it was like raising a wolf, and in the end, he had died in the mouth of the wolf. Laughable, lamentable, but this was reality, and it was often unexpected. A forcibly picked melon is not sweet. It never belonged to you, because you are Yao. Lin Feng stood in front of the great sage and sighed. He bent down and picked up the earth pillar, which had lost its luster. He held it in his hand, and it seemed heavy. He was not afraid of this thing that had devoured its master. There was no need for him to be afraid. The great sage's death could only be blamed on his own carelessness and negligence. He did not understand the origins of the earth pillar. These 3 heavenly treasures were the last remnants of the 12 ancestral shamans' power. How could Panga's treasures be used by Yao? Even if it had submitted to the great sage's power, it would have been nothing more than waiting for an opportunity to strike. Under his continuous soul attacks, the great sage's soul power had been greatly depleted. At this moment, the earth pillar had taken advantage of his weakness to deliver the final and most fatal blow to the great sage. It was as if he had been stabbed by the person closest to him. It was an unjust death, but it was fated. What a pity! Lin Feng looked at the great sage's corpse and sighed softly. It was indeed lamentable that such a powerful person had died in such a way. However, the winner was always right, and the loser was always in the wrong. The one who died today was either him or Lin Feng. Clearly, Lin Feng's luck was much better than his. Farewell. Lin Feng turned and left. He was lucky enough to keep his life. It was a great gain for him. The golden and dazzling hall had now turned into ruins. An icy cold corpse quietly lay within the ruins. It was lonely and cold, just like a graveyard. However, what Lin Feng didn't know was that after he left, a gray light flashed across the eyes of the supposedly dead great saint. His hanging hands clenched into fists with a pop. Chapter 1564. It was an unexpected gain. The heavenly treasure, earth pillar. Lin Feng burst into laughter, but he also felt that fate was playing tricks on him. He thought that he would definitely die by sacrificing himself. Who would have thought that the great sage would die from the backlash of the earth pillar? On the other hand, he saved his life and even obtained a heavenly treasure. That day, the battle for the earth pillar could be said to be an abyss of suffering. Many experts died there. He also witnessed the appearance of the earth pillar with his own eyes. However, he did not have the strength to fight for it, so he chose to give up. He did not expect that, after going around in circles, the earth pillar would fall into his hands in the end. However, it was fated. No one could snatch what was his. After I return, I'll see if I can fuse with it. Lin Feng's eyes flickered as he thought to himself. Logically speaking, the earth pillar had just been tamed and fused with it. It had consumed a lot of energy, so he should be able to save a lot of effort. As for the backlash, he did not have to worry about it at all. The great sage was devoured by the earth pillar because of his bloodline. The magi and the demons were on opposite sides. Weapons had spirits, let alone heavenly treasures. How could they be used by the enemy? However, he was different. Not only did he have Panga's bloodline, but he also had Panga's eye. It was impossible for the earth pillar technique to devour him. He was very confident about that. However, that was all in the future. He still had one more thing to do. 2 extreme emperors formation. He returned to the 2 extreme emperors formation. After all, Lin Feng had a certain understanding of array formations. Coupled with the fact that he had entered it once, it did not take long for him to find the path of 2 extremes. Although he had consumed a lot of soul power, he had recovered a lot after some nourishment. Pangu's eye shone brightly, and the illusion could not get close. I haven't found it yet. Lin Feng closed his eyes and shared his vision with the puppet. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Mother was right. On the other side of the gate of two extremes is indeed the headquarters of the demons. To be precise, it should be a treasure trove. It was quite rich and could be said to have everything. Rare inner cores, blood essence, all kinds of rare ores, and so on. With the bad nature of the demons, they would not search for them themselves. These are clearly spoils of war. Priceless. Just from what he had seen, it was already impossible to measure it with money. After all, this is the loot from the first great war of the liches and demons. Back then, the Douling world was still in the developing era, so there were naturally many more precious items than there are now, Lin Feng said softly with satisfaction. Even if he did not find the Star Origin Stone, he had already profited greatly from this batch of spoils of war. The treasury was huge, but the spoils of war were scattered and piled up like small hills. What a waste. Lin Feng shook his head. The demon race did not intend to use these spoils of war at all. They just casually piled them up. Indeed, the monster race did not have the ability to use these heaven-sent treasures. In the world of the monster race, there was only fighting, plundering, and conquering. Even if they had cultivated into a human form and possessed consciousness, the blood flowing in their bodies was still that of wild beasts. His nature would not change. There's no rush. Take your time. Lin Feng smiled calmly. Since the great sage was dead, there was no longer an existence that could threaten him. He could take his time and even explore the other layers of the Demon Emperor Island. Even if he was determined to wipe out the entire Demon Emperor Island, it was not impossible. However, it was not worth it to do so. It would harm others without benefiting himself, and it would only benefit the wizard race. The great sage's death had great implications. The aftereffects are quite troublesome. Now that the great sage is dead, who else can restrain Wizard Emperor Jiang? Lin Feng frowned slightly. The situation was clear. As the great sage went into seclusion, the wizard race launched a counterattack. Under the leadership of Wizard Emperor Jiang, they were aggressive. On the other hand, the monster race was retreating. Anyone with eyes could see that the four emperors of the monster race were no match for Wizard Emperor Jiang. It was only a matter of time before the wizard race took back the situation. Now that the great sage was dead, it was one disaster after another for the monster race. Wizard Emperor Jiang was no longer restrained. What a headache! Lin Feng felt helpless. The complexity of the war troubled him because the southern region was now in an awkward situation. They had offended both the wizard race and the monster race at the same time, and they were caught in the middle. If not for the fact that the southern region now had a certain level of strength, and that the wizard race and the monster race were wary of each other, the southern region would have been razed to the ground. We'll talk about it later. Go back and discuss it with Shun. Lin Feng nodded. Even if the great sage's death greatly damaged the monster race's vitality, the monster race had a strong foundation, and the wizard race would not be one-sided in a short time. He still had enough time. Wizard race realm. Wizard Emperor Jiang was in a good mood. Although he did not know how the great sage died, it was not important. What was important was that it saved a lot of effort. Originally, he was a little afraid of eliminating a powerful enemy like the great sage. Although the success rate was more than 80% in his opinion, there was still a 20% chance of failure. But now, it was a 100% success. Lin Feng had done him a great favor. Pass down the order. Spread the news quickly. Emperor Jiang's eyes were bright as he shouted. Yes, Wizard Emperor. Wizard King Gomong accepted the order and left. Jiuyin, this is the best chance for you to establish your prestige. You must not miss it. Emperor Jiang looked at Shi Jiuyin, his voice burning. Once the news spreads, the monster race's morale will plummet, and their morale will plummet. The commander's death not only leaves them without a leader, but also a heavy blow to their morale. This time, I want the monster race to suffer a crushing defeat. Shi Jiuyin's eyes glimmered, and he bowed. Many thanks, Wizard Emperor. The two experts were no longer enemies. Ever since he learned of Wizard Emperor Jiang's intentions, Shi Jiaoyin had cooperated actively to prepare for his ascension to the throne a year later. Moreover, Emperor Jiang did not lie to him. He was indeed grooming him as his successor. Otherwise, how could he have gotten such a great opportunity? The four emperors' injuries varied, and the monster race's army was defeated one after another. Adding this shocking news to the monster race, it was like adding fuel to the fire. The fire was strong enough to burn them to death. Go, make good use of this opportunity. Emperor Jiang waved his hand. Yes. Shi Jiaoyin cupped his fists and retreated, his eyes shining with confidence. Soon, in the spacious ancestral Magus Hall, only Emperor Jiang was left. Looking at the majestic statues of the 12 ancestral magi, Emperor Jiang's eyes glimmered, and a rare smile appeared on his face. God bless the witch race. This opportunity was a heaven-sent opportunity for the witch race. Pull one hair and the whole body would be affected, hitting a dog when it's down. He had absolute confidence that before he broke through the void and left the battle spirit world, he could beat the monster race back to the sea, establishing the winning theme of this war of the witch race. The third war of the witch race would be the last. Only our witch race is qualified to be the true master of the battle spirit world. Emperor Jiang spread his arms wide, roaring at the sky. His arrogance reached the clouds, and Emperor Jiang was full of confidence. His voice reverberated in the ancestral Magus Hall, but as if he sensed something, Emperor Jiang exclaimed in surprise and raised his head to look at the starry sky. In an instant, that pair of confident eyes revealed astonishment, which then turned into shock. His smile froze. This. Emperor Jiang was stunned. Looking at the vast starry sky, he was dumbfounded. Following his gaze, he saw that the great saint's star, which represented the existence of the monster emperor, was covered by a layer of gray fog, flashing with gray light. Although it was dim, it was glowing and gradually becoming stronger, as if it had come back to life after death. Bizarre. It was extremely bizarre. The star that had already fallen and lost its life force was now glowing with radiance again. It was like a candle that had been blown out. No one had touched it, but when they turned around, they suddenly realized that the candle had started to burn again. How strange was that? How could this be? Emperor Jiang's chest rose and fell rapidly, but he was caught off guard by this sudden change. He had observed the stars for a long time, but he had never seen such a scene. A star was like a life, but now it looked like it had come back to life. It was too baffling. What shocked him the most was that the monster emperor's star was glowing with gray light, and its aura was getting stronger and stronger, as if dark clouds were covering the starry sky. Covering the sky with one hand. Although the gray light was dim, it did not mean that its power was weak, and even, it's stronger than before. Emperor Jiang took a deep breath, but he could not explain what had happened. Why did the great saint come back to life? Why did his power become even more terrifying? Why did the star seem to have been reborn and changed so drastically? It no longer had the aura of a monster emperor, but its power was not inferior. The battle for the monster emperor of the Douling world had officially come to an end, but the battle to become the real master of the Douling world had just begun. Monster Emperor Island, the 6th level. The dignified, flourishing, and dazzling palace within the restrictions had already transformed into a pile of ruins. With the strength of Lin Feng and the Great Saint, how could a mere palace withstand the top combat power of the Douling world? If it were not for the special material, not to mention turning into ruins, it would have disappeared from the world. At this moment, the only corpse lying quietly in the ruins slowly sat up as though it was coming back to life. It was extremely shocking. If Lin Feng saw it at this moment, he would definitely be shocked. He had witnessed the death of the great saint with his own eyes. His consciousness had disappeared, and his aura had completely disappeared. However, at this moment, the great saint had come back to life, eerily, but his aura had completely changed. His awe-inspiring aura had disappeared without a trace, and the golden light had turned into a faint gray color, as if it was hidden in the darkness. However, his powers seemed to be stronger than before. Pa! Clenching his fists, the great saint slowly got up with a terrifying aura. Dense, gray energy covered his entire body, and he was filled with the terrifying feeling of death. His eyes, especially, were like those of a devil, cold and ruthless, revealing a murderous glint. Although no one knew what was going on, one thing was for sure. The great saint had come back to life. Continue to update. I wonder how much more I can write before New Year's Day. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Anyway, Xiao Xiao has gone crazy, haha. Chapter 1565. Pa. Lin Feng's eyes widened instantly. The structure of Demon Emperor Island could be seen from the inside out, but not from the outside in. Even though he was in the dual extreme Emperor's array, Lin Feng could clearly sense the changes in the outside world, especially the palace that was close at hand. A terrifying aura gradually rose, and the terrifying energy directly awakened Lin Feng, who was in the dual extreme Emperor's array. Too strong. Who is it? Lin Feng was shocked. He couldn't guess who had such a terrifying power that was even stronger than the great sage that he had just killed. Closing his eyes, Lin Feng pursed his lips tightly and sensed the surrounding environment. He probed with his aura and fell into a deep state of silence. Very familiar. A very familiar power. It's the gray energy. Lin Feng opened his eyes and was shocked. This energy was the opposite of the life force. It was the terrifying power that existed in the cemetery, the energy emitted by the world-destroying demon god. It wasn't the first time he saw it, and he had touched it countless times. It was too familiar. But why would the gray energy appear here? Also, who had this gray energy? Could it be? No, it can't be him. Lin Feng immediately denied it. The world-destroying demon god that was silent in the deepest part of the cemetery couldn't suddenly appear. Moreover, although the gray energy that he sensed was strong, it was still far from the power of the world-destroying demon god. It's slightly stronger than the great sage that fought with me previously. Lin Feng nodded secretly. Wait, great sage? Lin Feng's eyes widened, and his chest rose and fell violently. It can't be right. A possibility appeared in his mind, and his body couldn't help but tremble slightly. How can it not be? He didn't leave the restriction at all, and he had carefully probed the palace before. There was no one there. In addition, there weren't many Demon Clan experts that could enter the 6th level of Demon Emperor Island. Even if someone wanted to enter the palace, how could he not sense it? The only possibility was Great Sage, the great sage that died in the ruins of the palace. Gray energy, death aura. Lin Feng bit his lips and clenched his fists. He might not know about other things, but the energy of death was the true energy of death. It was not a delusion that it could revive the dead. He had seen it with his own eyes in the graveyard, and even the shield of reality was currently nurturing those dead experts. If they could come back to life, why couldn't the great sage? It was difficult for him to understand the uniqueness of the gray death energy. Phew! Lin Feng let out a long sigh. His eyes were focused as he pondered. Very surprised. However, if he thought about it carefully, it might not be a bad thing. What harm would it do to him? The great sage shouldn't be able to sense me within the restriction. After all, the consciousness brought about by the gray energy is of a murderous nature. It's not very intelligent. Although the power is strong, it can obliterate a cultivator's consciousness and turn them into killing machines. Lin Feng nodded slowly and murmured. There were pros and cons, and the death energy also had a huge drawback. As long as Refined Puppet finds the Astral Origin Stone and brings it out, I can immediately leave the dual extreme monarch formation. By then, I'll be free to fly. What can the great sage do to me? The corners of Lin Feng's lips curled up as he said softly, with the supreme sage restraining which King Jiang, the war of the witches and demons will not be one-sided. The more intense the battle, the more opportunities the southern region will have to take advantage of it, just like Tianling during the first war of the witches and demons. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Lin Feng was very clear that the southern region needed enough time and space to slowly grow. And the key was balance. Fast. Although Lin Feng was not worried that the great sage would find him, it was better to stay in this dangerous place for as long as possible. One had to know that his main body was already at the end of its rope. During the battle with the great sage, he had used up 95% of his soul power. If not for the countless astral fruits he had collected on the 5th and 6th levels of Demon Emperor Island, he would not even be able to wake up, let alone stand here safe and sound. The soul was the foundation of a cultivator. When the soul was destroyed, the cultivator would die. This was the case for the great sage's death. His body, which was born from the essence of heaven and earth, was not damaged at all, but his consciousness had been destroyed and swallowed by the earth pillar. No, I haven't found it yet. Sharing Refining Puppet's vision, Lin Feng was also quite anxious. The treasure vault in the Gate of Two Extremes was also quite big. It was connected by one array formation after another, and it was very complicated. Refining Puppet had already entered at least a dozen areas, but it had repeated many times, and it was looking for the pattern. It had to be said that Refining Puppet was indeed smart. Although it had not found all the patterns, it had discovered many mysteries after passing through more than a dozen areas, saving a lot of time. It was just that its luck was not good. It still had not found the Astral Origin Stone treasure that its mother had mentioned. The treasure vault was too big. The foundation of the demon race was far deeper than he had imagined. However, he believed that he would soon find something after a thorough search of the area. Because here, there was everything. But many times, things that you thought would not happen would actually happen. Whoosh! The Two Extreme Emperor's formation shook slightly, but it was very weak. It was as faint as a leaf, but it was this small movement that made Lin Feng's eyes widen. His heart seemed to stop beating instantly. What did this mean? Someone had entered the Two Extreme Emperor's formation. Who? This? Lin Feng took a deep breath, and his expression changed. The identity of a newcomer was obvious. At this time, at this place, there was only one possibility for someone to appear in the Two Extreme Emperor's formation: the Great Sage. Why is he here? Lin Feng's expression changed greatly. Was it a coincidence? Or was he just passing by, looking for a way out? The thought flashed through his mind. Lin Feng held his breath and tried his best to hide his aura, even though he knew it was useless. If the Great Sage really wanted to investigate, with his strength, there was no way he could hide from his senses. The only thing he could hope for was that he was just passing by, leaving the palace. But could it be so coincidental? Whoosh! The surging aura caused the Two Extreme Emperor's formation to shake violently. There was no need to think about it. Just by looking, one could guess what had happened. Lin Feng's face turned pale. He couldn't understand how the Great Sage had discovered him. Even if he used his aura to investigate, it would take time. At the very least, Lin Feng could sense him. But it was as if the Great Sage had seen him. He didn't stop at all. The moment he entered the Two Extreme Emperor's formation, he rushed towards Lin Feng. What was going on? Whoosh! Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He suddenly saw the shield of reality and understood. I understand now. It's the energy of death. Lin Feng's expression was ugly. He finally understood. Energy attracted each other. The shield of reality was no longer an ordinary heavenly treasure. It was an existence filled with dense energy of death, just like its own kind. The Great Sage immediately sensed the shield of reality. In other words, his target wasn't Lin Feng. But what was the difference? With the gray energy as the main force, the Great Sage has become a killing machine. Lin Feng frowned. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Once the Great Sage found him, he wouldn't let Lin Feng go. He would kill Lin Feng quickly, not to mention whether or not he would steal the shield of reality. Lin Feng was no match for the Great Sage, even when he was at his peak, let alone when he was just an arrow at the end of its flight. The difference was too great. Once the Great Sage found him, Lin Feng would die. Damn it! Lin Feng gritted his teeth and looked at the path of two extremes. Lianho hadn't found the astral origin stone yet. If he took Lianho away, all his efforts would be in vain. Could he bear to do that? Even if I don't want to, I have to. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. Where there's life, there's hope. He still had a chance next time. After making up his mind, Lin Feng closed his eyes and prepared to leave with Lian Ho before the great sage arrived. But rejected? Lin Feng was slightly startled. He was a little confused, but the message in his mind shocked him. Whoosh! Through a large light door, Lin Feng shared Lian Ho's vision. Lin Feng's eyes widened. His breathing became rapid. In front of him was a huge treasury. It was piled up like a mountain. It was as tall as two people. It wasn't shaman coins. It had an even stronger energy. It was starry sky level energy. Astral origin stone, Lin Feng exclaimed. He was speechless. He didn't expect to see so many astral origin stones. Real astral origin stones. He didn't need to look to estimate the value of this small mountain. If it was converted to shaman coins, it would be worth more than 100 billion. Hiss! Taking a deep breath, Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He was extremely excited. Lianho didn't even need his order. Lianho had already collected the astral origin stones at the fastest speed and put them into the storage ring. It didn't hesitate at all. It was wise, decisive, and meticulous. Very good. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He couldn't stop praising Lianho's performance. This time, if he could leave safely and restart the Netherworld ship, Lianho would be the main contributor. Even he was shocked to find so many astral origin stones. However, Lianho didn't even waste a second. The moment it entered the treasury, it had already started collecting the stones. It was extremely fast. It's here. Lin Feng's eyes brightened. He looked behind him. The terrifying energy was getting stronger and stronger. It shocked his soul. It was so strong that he couldn't resist it. 3, 2, 1. Lin Feng counted in his mind. He counted every second. He shared Lianho's progress. At this moment, it had collected more than half of the astral origin stones in the treasury. It was enough. Come back, Lin Feng shouted. Instantly, Lianho's energy shook. He sensed it immediately. This time, Lianho didn't refuse. Although it didn't collect all the astral origin stones, more than half was enough. Swoosh! A gray-colored aura was approaching at an extremely fast speed. Lin Feng could even see the full appearance of him. It was the great saint who came back from the dead. However, what was revealed in those eyes was a gray and dark killing intent. He was no longer the original great saint. Goodbye, Lin Feng said indifferently. His eyes flashed. His body slowly disappeared like an illusion. He was summoned by his doppelganger and left Demon Emperor Island. Continue. There are still 27 hours before New Year's Day. I don't know how much I can update. I'll give you 3,000 first. I'll make sure to give you at least 10,000. Chapter 1566. Return. To Lin Feng, this could be said to be a walk on the edge of death. It was extremely dangerous. Whether it was the battle with the great sage when he first entered the forbidden land of the demon clan, or the first time he met the world-exterminating demon god in the graveyard, he was in great danger. Then, the battle with the great sage who was connected to the earth pillar was even more dangerous. If the great sage had not been careless and died from the earth pillar's backlash, his original body would have been turned into dust. Of course, the rewards were also great. Putting aside the fact that his soul had transformed into the Pangu Eye, which had greatly increased the strength of his main body, just the fact that he had saved his mother made this trip worthwhile. Not to mention that he had seen through the conspiracy of the demon race, obtained countless dead experts, and gained the greatest reward, Star Origin Stones. A sufficient amount of Star Origin Stones. Is it enough, Feng? Jiaju looked at him from the side, her eyes filled with anxiety. She had worked so hard and fought for so long, just to see this. At this moment, Lin Feng was patiently counting the Star Origin Stones that Lin Feng brought back. Hearing his mother's question, he turned and smiled, giving her a thumbs up. This simple action made Jiaju feel relieved, and she heaved a sigh of relief. It was more than enough. It was more tin enough. Soon, Lin Feng finished counting. From head to toe, he had a smile on his face. He was very satisfied. Lin Feng deserved the credit. Although they had only obtained about half of the star origin stones in the entire treasure trove, the amount of star origin stones they had obtained was already quite terrifying. If they were to convert it into shaman coins, then the value of the half of star origin stones they had obtained would be over 70 billion shaman coins. And how many shaman coins were needed to restart the Netherworld ship? 47 billion shaman coins. Lin Feng looked at his mother and said a number. Jia Yaju's eyes lit up, and her chest rose and fell slightly. She calmed herself down, and her beautiful eyes flickered. So, Xiaodian can be revived? I don't know yet, but I can restart the Netherworld ship and wake Toto up. Lin Feng said calmly and smiled. I believe that with Toto's ability and the resources I have now, it shouldn't be difficult to revive Father. Jiaju nodded and said softly, Then, let's start quickly, Feng. Although her voice was soft, there was a hint of anxiousness in it. Lin Feng looked at his mother. How could he not know the hope in her heart? She had cultivated bitterly for so long and endured for so long. Her mother had done it for her father and for this family. He didn't even hesitate to put himself in danger and even dared to barge into Demon Emperor Island. For her father, her mother could even give up her life. This was love. Lin Feng replied softly. As for himself, he had been looking forward to this day for far too long. Back then, for the sake of his father, for the sake of his promise, he gave up everything in the kingdom of Maru, even forsaking his position as the Holy King, and ventured into the boundless Do Ling world alone. Ziyao had already been found. Only his father had yet to be revived, and Toto had yet to be awakened. The remaining 2 wishes were about to be fulfilled. Phew. After calming down, Lin Feng's eyes lit up. His current state of mind was much more complicated than his mother's. This moment had finally arrived. Netherworld seal. Lin Feng shouted. In an instant, the Netherworld seal lit up. This time, he didn't need the star source energy to activate it. This was because the first time, a total of 7 billion Wu coins of star source energy had been charged into the Netherworld ship. The energy of the Netherworld ship had reached the dark red line at the bottom. The Netherworld ship had been activated and could sense smoothly. It had an emergency energy source. Whoosh! Lin Feng's figure instantly disappeared and entered the Netherworld ship. Everything was as usual. It was as if the Netherworld ship wouldn't change even after millions of years. This symbolized the existence of the energy technology of the Starry Sky world, which was far beyond the scope of the Do Ling world's energy. The Tianya crystal wall at the entrance was still flashing with a dazzling light. The 7-star crystals of the highest grade in the Do Ling world were merely ordinary decorations here. Passing through the passageway, Lin Feng looked at the Starry Sky experts who were dead but had an eternal physical body. His eyes flashed with light, and his breathing became heavy. Once, he was deeply shocked when he looked at these experts. Even in front of their corpses, he was like an ant. Now, although his strength had improved tremendously and he had even reached the highest level of the Do Ling world, he was still frightened and terrified when he looked at these super experts. Green skin, huge pores, strange face filled with sadness. The corpses were wearing a thick layer of armor. There were many complicated patterns on the armor. Their blood-red eyes were still wide open. He couldn't even look at them directly. Even the Pangu eyes seemed to be sucked in by those blood-red eyes. The stronger he was, the more he could feel the power of the Starry Sky experts. A weirdo with a curved horn on his head pierced the chest of another dirt-yellow-skinned, fanged weirdo with a long hair. Looking at these 2 weirdos, he felt as if he could see the scene of the battle at the Starry Sky level. Being trapped in it, in front of them, he felt so small and insignificant. The Starry Sky world. Lin Feng murmured, his eyes blurred. There was no fear, no fear. Inexplicably, he had a desire to leave the Do Ling world and enter the mysterious Starry Sky world to explore. Even if he died in the end, he would have no regrets. This was the most direct thought in his heart, the truest thought. Ah. Lin Feng smiled faintly and shook his head. It seems like there's always been crazy blood hidden in my body. It's just that I've been suppressed for a long time, replaced by a heavy burden and a sense of responsibility. That's why I've forgotten the foundation of being a martial artist. This is the true essence of cultivation. This is a true martial artist. Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. His heart was moved. All this time, he had been carrying far too many burdens. It was only now that the 3 wishes he had made when he left the hunting nation were about to be fulfilled that his closed heart was truly opened. He had found his true self, or perhaps I've been influenced by the great sage's martial artist heart. Lin Feng smiled and sighed. To be honest, he admired the great sage a lot. Even if they were on opposite sides, his persistence and pursuit of martial arts had always influenced him deeply. Until now, he still couldn't forget the shocking battle between the great sage and the witch Emperor Jiang. Although he lost, it was glorious. It was a pity that such an expert died in such a cowardly way. It was too unjust. Even in death, he couldn't rest in peace. He was controlled by the energy of death and couldn't be himself. More or less, he had to bear some responsibility for this. If it wasn't for him, he wouldn't have been devoured by the earth pillar. If it wasn't for him, he wouldn't have died. However, many things were destined. When I'm strong enough, I'll let you die in peace. Lin Feng said softly. This was the only thing he could do for the great sage. Along the way, he had a lot of thoughts. It was as if he had returned to the past. Everything had returned to the beginning. Lin Feng didn't stop. He slowly entered the top cabin where the energy tank was. There was no need to make any preparations. The front of the triangular, glass-like metal tank was wrapped in a layer of soft leather. It was sparkling and translucent. It could be seen clearly. The flow of astral origin energy just reached the deep red line at the bottom. Above the energy tank, there were many hubs and tubes that breathed like a heart. Now, if he wanted to supply astral origin energy, he didn't need to use himself as a carrier. He just needed to put the astral origin stone in. It was much more convenient. It was very calm. Now, Lin Feng was strangely quiet. His expression was calm. The astral origin stone slowly appeared in his hand. He directly put it into the hub. In an instant, the astral origin stone was sucked in. The energy tank was instantly activated. Like a huge mechanical gear, the astral origin stone was crushed and turned into pure astral origin energy. One piece followed by another. Lin Feng moved skillfully. His eyes sparkled as he stared at the energy tank. The absorption speed was very fast. It was much faster than when he absorbed the shaman coins for the first time. The astral origin energy in the energy tank kept rising. It was like the water level was rising. Bit by bit, the astral origin energy moved from the deep red line to the light red line. The light red line was a mark. It represented the backup energy. Once the astral origin energy reached the light red line, it meant that the netherworld ship could be truly revived. And Duo would definitely wake up. Soon, Lin Feng thought to himself, with more than 70 billion shaman coins worth of astral origin stones, it was no problem to meet the 47 billion shaman coins of the netherworld ship. He might even have a lot left. Time passed quickly. As the astral origin energy gradually reached the light red line, Lin Feng's eyes lit up bit by bit. He was waiting for the miracle to happen. He had been waiting for this moment for 10 years. Is it here? Finally, is it here? Wah! The lamp above the energy tank suddenly lit up and made a soft sound. Although the sound was soft, it was as pleasant as the sound of nature. Lin Feng's calm face instantly revealed a smile. He looked at the mark on the energy tank. The light red line was shining faintly. It was so beautiful. The netherworld ship was finally filled with backup energy. It was too difficult. Phew! Lin Feng let out a long breath as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. At this moment, he felt that the burden on his shoulders had been lifted. All his efforts had finally paid off. It was worth it. Lin Feng's eyes flickered as he looked around. He was confused. Where's Duo? Logically speaking, since the Netherworld ship had been reactivated, Duo should have woken up by now. But where is he? Why is he still nowhere to be seen after so long? Lin Feng's heart was filled with doubts. He couldn't help but frown. He looked at the energy tank. Everything was normal. Is something wrong? Lin Feng's mind was filled with questions. He looked around and called out softly, Duo. Duo. I'm here. Stop shouting. Suddenly, a familiar yet strange voice rang out. Lin Feng was slightly surprised. His eyes instantly lit up as he revealed a surprised smile. He hadn't heard this voice for a long time. However, he was sure that it was Duo. 6,000. With this 6,000, I've already updated 16,000 today. Oh, I'm going to sleep. I'll continue tomorrow. I won't cheat you. Even if I don't exceed today's update volume, I will at least fulfill my promise to reach 20,000. Chapter 1567. Schwa. Asterisk schwa. Asterisk a strange light gathered from all directions and formed the figure of a nearly 1 meter tall boy who was currently stretching lazily with sleepy eyes. It was Duo. Making such a big fuss and disturbing my sleep. What are you doing? Duo Hao pretended to be angry, his furrowed brow looking quite comical. Looking at the figure in front of him, Duo Hao felt as if he had been separated from him for a lifetime. Lin Feng pursed his lips lightly as the corners of his mouth curled into a smile he didn't even notice. There were thousands of words in his heart, but he couldn't say them out loud. He had been waiting for this moment for far too long. Seeing Duo Hao again, he had thought he would have to wait until he reached the starry sky world, but now he had completed this impossible task. The world was truly unpredictable. Hey, are you all right, Lin Feng? Duo Hao asked curiously as he looked Lin Feng up and down. Long time no see, Duo Hao. Thousands of words were condensed into a single sentence. Lin Feng smiled lightly, feeling like he had just reunited with an old friend. To him, Duo Hao was both a teacher and a friend, the first true teacher who had enlightened him on the path of martial arts. But his identity was so special that Lin Feng had always regarded him as a friend. There were no secrets between the two of them. Please, how long can it be? Duo Hao rolled his eyes, shook his head, and stretched his body. It's just a nap? Duo's eyes widened as he looked at Lin Feng. He rubbed his eyes with his chubby little hands and shook his head. Am I dreaming? Or am I still asleep? He muttered. Am I dreaming? Or am I still asleep? Lin Feng, when did you cultivate to the Saint King Realm High Order? Duo was dumbfounded. Lin Feng also burst into laughter. Indeed, this period of time had been very long for him, the longest and most rugged journey of his life so far. But to Duo Hao, it had only been the blink of an eye. Nap for 10 years, that was all. One had to know that Duo Hao had been waiting for him for a full 330,000 years. 10 years, in the blink of an eye. This artifact spirit in front of him was an artifact spirit with extraordinary wisdom, a multi-billion-year-old monster. F***CK. Duo quickly reacted and gave him a thumbs up before exclaiming in surprise. Lin Feng, you're really good. I just took a nap, and you're already on the verge of becoming a starry sky master. Your cultivation speed. Isn't it a little too terrifying? 10 years. In 10 years, he had gone from a lowly human warrior in the kingdom of Meru to the all-powerful human emperor who stood at the peak of the Douling world. Indeed, Lin Feng's cultivation speed was more than just terrifying. It was simply heaven-defying. His cultivation speed was like that of a reincarnated monster. It's a long story. Lin Feng smiled and looked at Plenty. They had not seen each other for 10 years, but there was still no estrangement between them. The friendship between them was quite deep. After a brief exchange of greetings, Lin Feng quickly told him about what had happened in the past few days. Oh, as if listening to a story, Duo nodded his head repeatedly, his eyes shining brightly. That's about it. Lin Feng breathed a sigh of relief and roughly described what had happened to Duo. If he really wanted to tell them everything one by one, 3 days and 3 nights might not be enough. These 10 years were as long as a reincarnation cycle to him. What he experienced, what he gained, what he lost, what he gained, it was too much. This was life. The indescribable joys and sorrows were all in one's heart. Not bad at all. Duo nodded his head in admiration. He did not know how many times he had said this in a short period of time, but his admiration came from the bottom of his heart. Lin Feng's good fortune, his ability to grasp opportunities, and his outstanding adaptability far exceeded Duo's expectations in all aspects. Originally, in his opinion, with Lin Feng's lousy aptitude, it was already good enough for him to become a saint stage expert. Moreover, it would take a lot of time and effort to cultivate him. But now, not only had Lin Feng become a high-level Saint King, but he was also not far from becoming a Starry Sky Master. I really didn't misjudge you. Duo showed a big smile and patted Lin Feng's shoulder with his chubby little hand to show his encouragement. Your performance did not disgrace your master's face. When you enter the Starry Sky world in the future, you will definitely become famous and invincible. It's still early, Lin Feng smiled. Before entering the Starry Sky world, he still had many things to do. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility. This was the best description for the current him. Just the southern region alone, he could not ignore the heavenly secret Saint Lord's request. Not to mention the fact that the blood of humans flowed in his body. How could he watch as his fellow humans were killed and die in a war? The answer was obviously no. Do you want me to help you become a Starry Sky Master directly? Duo raised his eyebrows and grinned. No need. Lin Feng shook his head and refused without even thinking about it, saying, if you blindly rely on others and take shortcuts, sooner or later you will fall back to square one. Only by moving forward step by step and cultivating diligently can one's strength truly belong to oneself. This is the path of a cultivator. Indeed, he didn't need it. Even without Duo's help, hadn't he reached this point step by step? Relying on others to take shortcuts would only lead to dependence and cowardice. Only by relying on oneself would one become a true powerhouse, a true cultivator. Just like the Tao of the spear, every cultivator who truly used the spear had their own unique Tao of the spear. Moreover, the present was different from the past. Now, he had no doubt that he could become a Starry Sky Master in the future. It was just a matter of time. The path to the Starry Sky was not far away. Tisk, you've matured a lot. Duo smiled and narrowed his eyes. It seems that you haven't wasted the past 10 years, Lin Feng. Your strength has not only grown, but your temperament has also matured a lot. After a pause, Duo shrugged. Actually, I was just joking with you. Even if I wanted to promote you, the Nethership's energy is not enough. Lin Feng was speechless and smiled bitterly. After 10 years, Duo was still the same. He hadn't changed at all. Indeed, the Netherworld ship had only replenished its reserve energy, and it was still far from being fully charged. The Astral Origin Stone was relatively precious. There weren't many Astral Origin Stones on ordinary planets. It was already very rare for the Douling world to have such a large batch of Astral Origin Stones. If they were to waste it again, they might not be so lucky to find it again in the future. Save as much as possible. However, it really makes one click his tongue and wonder. A small Douling world actually has so many Star Origin Stones? Duo muttered thoughtfully. I dare not believe it. I think it has something to do with Pangu and the 3,000 fiend gods. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. Pangu and the 3,000 demon gods were all masters of the universe, so it was not surprising that they had Star Origin Stones. Star Origin Stones were rare on ordinary planets, but on the planets where the masters of the universe were born, Star Origin Stones were nothing to them. Different levels of power had different horizons and different resources. Just like himself now, Douling coins were nothing to him. What was a star crystal? However, in the Lin family village back then, a little Douling coin was already priceless. In the Yinling prefecture, a little star crystal was enough to make people go crazy. This was the difference in levels. Smart. Duo nodded, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Other than the star origin stones, there might be other treasures. Other treasures? Lin Feng was slightly stunned. He smiled faintly and said, "Even if there are other treasures, I can't use them." "That's true." Duo shrugged. They looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. The atmosphere was harmonious. After a long separation, there were too many things to talk about. However, to Lin Feng, there was still one more important thing to do. Revive his father. This was his biggest wish, and it was also his mother's biggest wish. That day, his father was injured and almost died because of him. His meridians were all broken, and he was seriously injured like a cripple. His life spirit and heart were shattered. According to Duo, his father had always been at death's door. He relied on his strong will and willpower to hold on. In the end, in order to replace Duo's eyes, he completely exhausted his body and sacrificed the only strength he had left. The greatest thing in the world was his parents. Filial piety was the most important thing. As his son, no matter the price, he had to save his father. Soon, under Duo's guidance, he passed through the light door and came to a quiet small room. Although the room was small, there was a familiar smell to it. Lin Feng stepped in slowly and walked towards the only cold crystal coffin in the room. Cold light shone through the crystal coffin, and there were spiraling ice cubes on it, giving it a cold luster. Inside the coffin, a man's body was sealed in ice. His body was covered in a layer of frost, and he was completely isolated from the outside world. "Father," Lin shouted on. "Father!" Lin Feng murmured softly, looking at his father with mixed feelings. It was as if he had returned to the past, Memories appeared like fragments, piecing together piece by piece. A father's love was like the sky. His father was not a person who was good with words, but everything he did was for his own good from the bottom of his heart. He guided and helped him time and time again. That day, in order to save him and his brother, his father was seriously injured and fled to the Lin family village. There were many things that his father would never tell him. This was what it meant to be a man, a true man of indomitable spirit. He silently contributed without asking for anything in return. He used his body to support the family. Even if the family was in tatters, he had no regrets. At that time, he could only watch as his father almost died, but there was nothing he could do. Today, it was different. Duo. Lin Feng looked at the ice coffin, his eyes shining brightly. Duo responded. "Tell me, how can I save my father?" Lin Feng turned his head and looked at Duo with a serious expression. No matter the price, no matter how difficult it was, he would do his best to do it. Just like his mother, she would not hesitate to sacrifice her life to save his father. It was the same for him. "Are you sure?" Duo narrowed his eyes and asked. "Yes," Lin Feng said without hesitation. "As long as I can save my father." "Okay." Duo's eyes flashed brightly. 9,000. Continue. Next chapter. Break through the minimum 10,000. Chapter 1568. 3 Steps. Duo said seriously. Lin Feng listened attentively. "Actually, it shouldn't be too difficult for the current you." Duo shrugged and chuckled. Lin Feng was speechless. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Duo was still as childish as before. However, this was at least good news. Even so, you must remember not to be careless. The first step is to reconstruct the meridians and connect the broken meridians. Then, nourish your soul and recover its power. Finally, Duo dragged out his words and looked at Lin Feng. "Wash your body and return it to its original state." "Okay, what should I do?" Lin Feng had no objections. Although he didn't know how to treat it, he trusted Duo. "One step at a time," Duo said. "First, we'll start with the first step. Reconstruct the meridians. Listen to my instructions and open the ice coffin. Don't rush. Adjust your state of mind. All 3 steps require you to personally perform. You must not fail." "Don't worry, I definitely won't fail." Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. His voice was filled with absolute confidence. Not to mention that he was saving his father, he would definitely do it wholeheartedly and carefully. After all, he was a refiner. How could reconstructing the meridians be more difficult than refining a heaven-ranked treasure? The refinement of an astral treasure truly didn't allow for the slightest mistake or flaw. Okay, then let's begin. Duo nodded. Reconstruct the meridians. This was a very complicated process. For Lin Feng, it was also a great test. The star source energy entered his father's body. It was like a pair of hands, connecting his father's broken meridians one by one. Nourished by the star source energy and infused with life energy, the meridians slowly reconnected like withered trees in spring. How many meridians were there in the human body? The large meridians and the small meridians were like tiny rivers. The large meridians consumed a lot of energy, but reconnecting them was actually easy. The troublesome part was the small meridians. They were so thin that they couldn't be seen. Only the star source energy could sense them. Lin Feng placed his hands flat on his father's back and closed his eyes. His mind was as meticulous as dust. He was very clear that he couldn't make the slightest mistake. How could he randomly connect the meridians in his body? If he made a mistake, his entire body would be in a mess. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Even if he had refined countless astral treasures at this moment, Lin Feng could not help but feel somewhat nervous. After all, it was his first time, and his target was his father. There must be no mistakes. Plenty floated in the air, rubbing his chin and nodding his head, his eyes glittering. Not bad at all. His control is fine and perfect. This kid, Plenty praised and clicked his tongue. He has improved a lot in the past 10 years. This level of control is impossible without the strength of an artificer. Master has picked up a treasure this time. Good seedling, really good seedling. Not only is his aptitude excellent, his character is also rare and commendable. Even his attainments as an artifact refiner are so outstanding. Duo narrowed his eyes as he looked at Lin Feng. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. Previously, he actually did not expect too much from Lin Feng. He had only waited for 330,000 years and did not want to waste any more time. Even if Lin Feng's aptitude was barely qualified, he could only make do with it. How could he have imagined that after 3 days, he would have a whole new level of respect? The current Lin Feng was outstanding in every aspect, considerably perfect. Duo was like a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. The more he looked, the more he liked him. Lin Feng did not know how to think. In fact, he could not think at this moment. All of his thoughts were focused on his father, incomparably focused. He did not have the slightest bit of distraction. Reconstructing meridians was a considerably delicate job. Even if Lin Feng's attainments as an artificer were profound, he still spent no less than 6 hours to completely connect all of his father's meridians. He even carefully checked them 3 times, just in case. He absolutely could not make any mistakes. Phew! Letting out a long breath, Lin Feng opened his eyes and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He was considerably exhausted, but it was worth it. He stood up and looked at his father. At this moment, he felt completely different. Originally, his father was like a broken porcelain vase. But now, at least, he looked like a whole body. Even if he was still in a deep sleep, the feeling was completely different. He was just sleeping without any visible pain, just like a normal person. It's quite perfect. Duo gave him 2 thumbs up and raised his eyebrows with a smile. Lin Feng smiled tiredly. A huge weight had been lifted from his heart. Even Duo had said so. It proved that his first step was very successful. This was enough. 1 step at a time. By the way, Duo. Lin Feng looked at Duo. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he asked curiously, why must the first step be to personally reconstruct the meridians? What will happen if I use the star fruit, Qi Yuan fruit, or 1,000 meridians convergence? Not only can they reconstruct the meridians, but they can also regrow broken limbs. Duo blinked his big eyes and said curiously, of course they can be used. Lin Feng was stunned. Isn't the first step to personally connect the meridians? Duo blinked and asked in return, "Who said so?" Lin Feng was stunned. He shook his head speechlessly. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that using the star fruit could connect the meridians, but he had spent a lot of effort. He was also afraid that something would go wrong, so he wasted a lot of time and energy. In the end, it was useless. "You defeated me," Lin Feng said helplessly. Fortunately, at least he had successfully reconstructed his father's meridians. He had only wasted a little time. "I didn't know." Duo pretended to be innocent and blinked his big eyes. "Then do you have any star fruits similar to the soul-returning fruit?" "Of course." Lin Feng sighed. He looked at Duo and said helplessly, "If I didn't mention it, you wouldn't have asked me to personally nourish the fate's soul and recover its strength, right?" Clearly, the star fruits were enough to complete the task. They could even do it better than him. "It's your fault for not mentioning it before," Duo said with his arms crossed. "All right," Lin Feng sighed helplessly. However, he didn't want to be entangled in this matter. Anyway, he had already done it. At least everything was in order and nothing went wrong. A light flashed in his hand, and the soul-returning fruit appeared. Although there were very few soul-returning fruits, and he and his mother had used a lot of them, Wing had helped him earn a lot on Demon Emperor Island. It was too much. It was just a soul-returning fruit. Not to mention one. Even 10 of them were just a small number. Come, let's continue with the second step. Nourish the fate's soul and recover its strength. Duo said and regained his serious expression. With your father's endurance, the entire soul-returning fruit is too nourishing. Lin Feng, you have to do it personally. Be careful. The fate soul is very weak. You can't make any mistakes. Understand. Lin Feng's eyes flickered as he nodded. Where the soul was, it was the foundation of a martial artist and a person. Duo nodded and said seriously, "All right. Listen to my instructions carefully." Time passed by second. Just as Duo said, the second step was rather complicated. After all, his father had lost all his strength and had to rely on himself to help him slowly absorb it bit by bit. Even with a top-grade star fruit, like the soul-returning fruit, it still took a lot of effort. It wasn't any easier than the first step, especially the weakness of the fate soul. His father's fate soul had been injured before. It was like a broken porcelain that would shatter with a touch. He had to be very gentle and careful. Nurturing was a rather tedious process. Fortunately, Lin Feng was quite patient. His face was slightly red. Lin Feng pursed his lips and channeled his strength again and again. He slowly melted the soul-returning fruit and released his soul-returning fruit to help his father recover the strength of his fate soul. That tiny life spirit was like a small blade of grass, slowly growing and growing again a full 10 hours. When the fate soul regained its strength and radiated with vigor, Lin Feng was almost exhausted. It was too tiring. Even an Iron Man wouldn't be able to withstand the continuous exhaustion of energy, let alone his own injuries. He had been severely injured in the battle with the Great Sage. His soul power hadn't even reached 30% yet. However, he didn't want to wait any longer. He didn't want to see his mother's anxious and hopeful expression. Also, he wanted to revive his father as soon as possible and see him. This was his greatest wish. Lin Feng clenched his fists. His tired eyes flashed as he gritted his teeth. His will was still as firm as ever. Although he was mentally exhausted, he had a goal and motivation. He could persevere. Duo carefully inspected his father's body. After a long time, he nodded and said, "Perfect. You did well. Next is the third step, cleansing the body and returning it to its original state." Looking at Lin Feng, Duo asked, "How is it? Do you want to rest for a while?" "No need." Lin Feng's eyes burned. He could definitely overcome this challenge. After all, his soul was injured. Even if he rested for a while, it wouldn't be much better. There was no need to waste time. It was better to use a strong will to complete the third step in one go so that his mother wouldn't have to wait outside for too long. Okay. Duo looked at Lin Feng and said, "The third step doesn't require anything. You just need to have perfect control over your strength." Although your father's body looks good on the outside, it's already riddled with injuries on the inside. It's fine if he doesn't take the third step, but his future achievements will be limited. Reaching the Saint Realm is probably his limit. If you want him to recover his true strength, there's only one path to take: destruction and reconstruction. Destroy everything, cleanse the body, and return it to its original state. Duoduo's eyes lit up as he looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng nodded thoughtfully. He understood what Duo meant. His father's injuries had dragged on for far too long. It was to the point where it was beyond cure. It was like a broken porcelain that couldn't be broken anymore. Even if it was forcefully repaired, there would still be traces of it. Only by shattering it and resetting it could those traces be completely erased. Perhaps his father would have to start all over again after cleansing the body, but what did that count for? The current him had enough resources to help his father cultivate quickly. Without destruction, there would be no construction. 12,000, breaking through the minimum of 1,000, charging towards 20,000. Chapter 1569. Grand Lotus Garden. Jia Yizhu pursed her lips and waited patiently. Only the sound of her breathing could be heard in the empty room. She was anxious with every passing second. At this time, Lin Feng had disappeared into the netherworld ship for a day and night. It was hard to endure. For Jia Yizhu, this day and night could be said to be the longest time she had waited. Every second felt so unbearable. That day, they separated because she was not strong enough. Today, she had tried her best. If she could not revive Xiao Tian this time, it would be a heavy blow to her. After waiting for so many years, Jia Yizhu's heart was in turmoil. She could not describe the joys and sorrows in her heart. She knew that if she could not revive Xiao Tian this time, the hope would be even slimmer in the future. Could he be revived? There must be no problem. Jia Yizhu clenched her fists. Her body was trembling. She could not calm down. Such a long period of time could actually be spent cultivating, but no matter what, she could not calm her heart down, because at this moment, all her thoughts were occupied. Revive. She must revive. No one knew how much she had sacrificed. Since they were forced to separate, she had worked hard to cultivate. The hardships she had endured were not known to outsiders. It was imaginable that she could cultivate from an ordinary warrior to an ancient god in such a short time. She had sacrificed so much and gained so much. After that, she had traveled all over the wasteland world to search for the Star Source Stone, until she found out that the Star Source Stone might exist. For her lover, she did not hesitate to enter the legendary forbidden area of the Monster Clan. For what? For whom? Lin Xiaotian. Love was always blind and deep. For the one you loved, you were willing to pay any price. And would the heavens let the lovers get married in the end? In an instant, a bright light flashed, and Lin Feng's figure suddenly appeared. His face was filled with deep fatigue, and he looked as if he had exhausted all his strength. However, his eyes were shining, and he was full of spirit. There was an indescribable excitement and agitation in his eyes. Feng. Seeing Lin Feng appear, Jia Yizhu's beautiful eyes instantly lit up. However, she did not see the figure that she had been yearning for day and night. Jia Yizhu's heart was hanging in the air, but it fell back down in an instant. Her face turned pale. Just as she was about to ask, another light flashed. This time, it was another man's figure that was different from the others. His figure was well-proportioned, and he wasn't particularly tall, but he had a kind of maturity and experience. His eyes were calm and natural, as if he had seen through everything in the world. His appearance instantly caused Jia Yizhu's pale face to redden. Her beautiful eyes widened as her body trembled uncontrollably. Xiao Tian, it really is you. It really is you, she muttered to herself. Her voice was like a thread going up and down. She was quite emotional. Thank you for your hard work, Yizhu. Lin Xiaotian opened his mouth and showed a rare smile. The pair of eyes that had seen through the mundane world had a gentleness that only belonged to lovers. For eyes looked at each other. At this moment, there was no room for anything else in their eyes. Jia Yaju burst into tears. No matter how strong she was, no matter how strong she was always a woman. A woman who longed to be loved, and a woman who longed for a family. Lin Xiaotian opened his arms and gently hugged Jia Yaju into his arms. His eyes were moist as he stroked Jia Yaju's hair. At this moment, he had been waiting for a long time. The scene was warm and touching. Lin Feng stood aside and gently wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. A happy smile appeared on his face. Seeing that his father and mother were finally reunited, he felt as if his heart was about to jump out of his chest. He couldn't say anything. There was only a rush of excitement and satisfaction. As a son, wasn't this what he wanted? The power and benefits of the mundane world were far from being comparable to this ordinary and warm feeling. Reuniting after a long separation and coming back to life after death, he believed that his father and mother had too much to say and too much to say. There was no need for him to stand here and be a third wheel. Lin Feng smiled and glanced at his parents again. His figure flashed gently and left in an instant. There were many things to do. Many things to do. For Lin Feng, there was no possibility of stopping. He couldn't neglect his own cultivation, and he couldn't ignore the affairs of the southern region. The god-making plan was carried out one batch after another. He was quite busy and wished he could have a few more clones. Now that his main body had completed the last task, he returned to the star-stepping mansion to recuperate and recover the power of his soul. Only his clone was left to deal with all the matters, but it was a mess. However, the feeling was completely different. He had restarted the Netherworld ship, awakened Toto, and even resurrected his father. Now, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. There was only one task left, or rather, it was his responsibility. The safety of the entire human race. Phew! Exhaling softly, Lin Feng closed all the various proposals on the table. He had finished dealing with everything that needed to be dealt with. The southern region was so big, and there were many trivial matters. Originally, Shun was handling these matters, but Shun had something to deal with and left for a while. Thus, he left all of them to him. King Yin was in charge of the saint-level experts of the god-making plan, while King Lu was in charge of those below the saint level. They were all very busy. Originally, he had Empress Qianlian to help him solve his problems, but recently, Empress Qianlian had gone into seclusion to cultivate again. As for Wan Macho, that guy loved martial arts as much as his life. He was a cultivation madman. Of course, it was impossible for there to be no talents in the southern region. It was just that there were too few people who could be trusted. This can't go on. Lin Feng shook his head, feeling a little troubled. It was fine to let him handle some affairs occasionally, but if this continued, it wouldn't be right for him or the southern region. It was just like when he was in the kingdom of Maru. Although he was the commander of the human race, his mission was to cultivate and increase his strength, because this was his strength. Management, politics, and so on were all not his strengths. Is there anyone else who can help? Lin Feng rested his chin on his hand and frowned slightly. He wanted to find a scapegoat to quickly throw away the mission. Clan leader Lin Jun? No. Managing a clan is already his limit. Grandfather? No. Grandfather is an ancient after all. I can trust him, but it's hard for me to trust others. Should I look for my younger brother? My younger brother is quite capable, and his strength is good in all aspects. However, he is not famous enough, and it's hard for others to trust him to manage the kingdom of Maru. Moreover, the power level of the kingdom of Maru and the southern region is too far apart. Lin Feng felt a headache coming on. He couldn't do this, and he couldn't do that. It was hard to have the best of both worlds. He had to think hard. 14,000 continue. Chapter 1570. It was really difficult. It seemed simple, but it was not. He had to be capable, convincing, and trustworthy. Moreover, he had to be a human being. This requirement was really too high. After thinking about it for a long time, he still couldn't find a suitable candidate. Lin Feng let out a long sigh and felt a little helpless. Let's wait for Shun to return first. I don't feel at ease in trusting such a big southern region to someone I don't trust. After all, this was his responsibility. He couldn't shirk responsibility and wouldn't do irresponsible behavior. As he was thinking in his heart, suddenly, Lin Feng's eyes lit up slightly. He looked into the distance and couldn't help but walk out with a smile. The man's breath was very weak. He seemed to be an ordinary person, but his identity was quite extraordinary. His father, Lin Xiaotian. "Are you better, father?" Lin Feng asked with a smile. Walking in the garden, looking at his father's face, he could roughly guess his father's physical condition. "After a few days of rest, I'm almost recovered." Lin Xiaotian nodded slightly, without much expression on his face. Although he was now weak, he didn't look sad at all. "I'm sorry, father," Lin Feng said softly. "You can't keep your cultivation." Lin Xiaotian said indifferently, "I'm very satisfied to be able to stay alive and reunite with you and mother. Strength doesn't matter. What I lose will come back sooner or later." Lin Xiaotian's eyes flashed, and he said slowly, "But there are some things that can never come back once lost." Lin Feng nodded. He knew what his father meant. He should do what he should do. Don't think so much. The opportunity was fleeting. "I'm sorry, father. I haven't had time to accompany you and mother recently. When I have time, I'll take you back to the Lin family village to see my brother," Lin Feng said. "It doesn't matter. Business is more important." Lin Xiaotian's eyes flashed with a soft light, and he said softly, "I can also take this opportunity to accompany your mother and make up for the regret of the past 30 years. Looking at Lin Feng, Lin Xiaotian's eyes flashed with a strange brilliance. "I was disheartened after the battle and lived in seclusion in the Lin family village. I only hoped that you and your brother could live a peaceful life, but I didn't expect. Today, Fenger, you have actually become a top-notch expert who commands the entire Douling world. It's all thanks to you that your mother and I were able to reunite again." Lin Xiaotian smiled and sighed softly. "The world is really unpredictable." Indeed, Lin Feng also smiled. Back then, his father had said that in terms of aptitude, he was not even as good as his younger brother. However, aptitude and talent were not everything. Personality, opportunity, perseverance, there were too many. The path of a martial artist was only known to oneself. Actually, I didn't expect it either. Lin Feng shrugged and smiled. Ever since he was young, he had never been an ambitious person with great goals. It was only for the sake of his family and loved ones that he walked the path of a martial artist step by step. Even after repelling the beast tide and saving the Tianwu continent, it was the same. When he came to the Douling world, he only wanted to find Zi Yao and save his father. He had never thought of sitting on the throne of the human emperor one day. However, step by step, he had slowly walked to where he was now. It had to be said that there was heaven's will in the underworld. Lin Xiaotian nodded and looked at Lin Feng with a solemn expression. He said earnestly, "The more power you have, the more responsibility you have to bear. As a father, I only hope that you will be safe and sound. However, at the same time, I also hope that you will not forget your original intention. Don't forget your responsibility. Only then can you be a real man." "I will, father." Lin Feng looked at his father, his eyes flashing. Lin Xiaotian replied. The solemn expression on his face slowly disappeared. He said softly, "When things calm down, I will return to the kingdom of Aru with your mother to live in seclusion and live a simple life." There was a gentle light in his eyes. He unconsciously revealed a smile. It was a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. Lin Feng knew that his father had thought it through. In fact, he had always known that his father was not a person who was attached to power. He might not be smart, but he had great wisdom and great ability. He would be firm and persistent in the goal in his heart, even if he had to sacrifice his life. And his character, in a certain aspect, was completely inherited from his father. Lin Feng's eyes suddenly lit up. Looking at his father, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Why didn't he think of it? After searching for so long, he had forgotten about the person in front of him. His father, Patriarch Lin Jun, had once mentioned that his father's ability was 100 times stronger than his. However, His father had never liked to fight for power, so he did not take over as the patriarch. However, this did not mean that he was not capable. It should be known that at that time, his father's ability was stronger than his second uncle, Lam Tokti. Just this alone was enough to show that. Not only did his father have the blood of the human race flowing in his body, but he also had a strong sense of responsibility like himself. Most importantly, he was his father, a person who could be 100% trusted. Wouldn't it be wonderful if his father could take over the political affairs and control the rear of the southern region? The only problem was, could his father convince the public? The answer was obviously no. Firstly, his father was not famous. Secondly, his father's strength was now zero. He was not even a martial artist. It was too difficult for him to convince the public. Lin Feng pursed his lips and frowned slightly. In an instant, he laughed self-deprecatingly. So what? What did it matter if the public was convinced or not? He was his father. Who would dare to say no if he was pushed to the top? Using people for his own sake? He used people for his own sake. It had always been like this. Wasn't it the same when he pushed his younger brother onto the political platform in the kingdom of Maru? What happened later? His younger brother had real ability. As he slowly made achievements, he was now sitting firmly on the throne and was famous for his prestige. Could it be that his father didn't have real ability? Lin Feng smiled faintly. When he thought of this, the only scruple in his heart disappeared. It was decided then. The only question now was whether his father was willing to do it or not. If his father really didn't care about politics and wanted to live a carefree life with his mother, then, as his son, he naturally wouldn't force him to do so. What do you want to say? Lin Xiaodian looked at Lin Feng's hesitant expression and said indifferently, Father, I have an idea, but I don't know if you are willing to do it. Lin Feng looked at his father and smiled. His father was indeed shrewd. He only showed a slight expression, and his father had seen through him. In this case, there was no need to hide. There was nothing that could not be said between father and son. Soon, Lin Feng briefly explained his thoughts to Lin Feng. Lin Xiaoyan's eyes lit up, and he fell silent. The atmosphere was quiet. In the garden, Lin Feng walked side by side with his father. He did not want to disturb him. He did not want to interfere with his father's decision. It would be good if his father was willing to help him. If his father was not willing, he would just let it go. Although he knew his father would definitely agree if he insisted, it was not his intention. After a long time, I promise you. Lin Xiaodian slowly uttered 4 words, landing on the ground with a sound. Looking at his father, he could see from his eyes that his father was not doing it for power or responsibility. Instead, it was for the love between father and son. Deputy Region Master. As the Lord of the Southern Region, Lin Feng officially gave the order. He appointed 2 Deputy Region Masters, namely Shun and Lin Xiaotian. This order caused an uproar in the Southern Region. There was an uproar in the 9 continents. They could not believe it. Shun's appointment could be said to be supported by the people, but Lin Xiaotian. Who was Lin Xiaotian? This question puzzled the people of the Southern Region. Let me tell you a secret. Lin Xiaoyan's true identity. He is Lin Feng's biological father. What? Is this for real? He appointed a person who can't even be the clan leader as the Deputy Region Master. He has no experience at all. How can he manage the entire Southern Region? This is too much of a joke, right? That's right. I heard that Lin Xiaodian has just recovered from his serious injuries. He's so weak that he can't even trust a chicken. If it's a one-on-one battle, I can defeat him. All kinds of rumors were spreading in all the continents and counties. With the instigation of some people, the rumors became more and more outrageous. There were even signs of resentment among the people. However, the people were not convinced. Humans were like this. They would forget the pain once the scars had healed. Not long ago, they had received Lin Feng's favor and praised him countless times for his ability to protect the Southern Region. But now, they had just turned around, and Lin Feng's contributions had already been thrown out of the window. They thought the power of the people was the most powerful, and the power of public opinion was quite strong. They only remembered Lin Feng's kindness, but forgot about the past. Lin Feng was the existence they called a tyrant. Those who are not convinced, get lost. Leave the southern region and go wherever you want. From now on, those who talk about this in private will be arrested. Those who spread rumors and create trouble will be locked up. Those who try to sow discord will be locked up. Those who insult will be killed. I don't want to hear any more gossip about my father. Those who violate the rules will have to bear the consequences. In the sky of all the continents, Lin Feng held the doomsday spear in his hand, and his eyes were cold. A strong, killing intent burst out. Even though it was just in the sky, one could still feel the terrifying aura. It was a naked warning and a threat. Lin Feng never cared about how others thought of him. Whether he was wrong or not, history would judge him. Not now. Appointing people by favoritism. He had always been like this. A tyrant who acted alone. It was quiet. Since Lin Feng had issued a warning, he would not tolerate it anymore. In an instant, the 9 continents were filled with a reign of terror. After receiving the order, the city lords wantonly arrested people in the tea houses and restaurants. It was very high profile. All those who protested were locked up and locked up. A few who openly provoked and insulted him were even beheaded on the streets. Their methods were extremely violent. However, it was the most direct and effective way to shut people up. Most humans bullied the weak and feared the strong because they were at the bottom of the social ladder and did not want to see others doing well. In just a few days, the storm quickly subsided. However, this was just the beginning. The real challenge did not come from the ordinary people of the southern region. It was the liches and demons. 17,000 continue. Chapter 1571. Another battle had begun. The shaman and demon race could not stand the loneliness. As long as they could find the slightest weakness of the other party, they would beat them to death. As the rumor spread, the news of the great sage's death spread like a plague. The entire demon race army panicked and fell into chaos. Adding on the fact that the 4 sovereigns were injured, hiding, and scheming, the situation became even more chaotic. Shi Jiuyin led the shaman race army and rushed over in a mighty manner. Take his life while he's weak. The demon race army's morale was low. On the other hand, the shaman race army's morale was high. They were ambitious and wanted to drive the demon race back to the boundless sea and reclaim their lost land. Another great battle broke out. This time, there was no suspense. The demon race army was at a disadvantage almost as soon as the battle started, even if they were in a defensive position. Strength was indeed important, but morale, it was also a factor that could not be ignored in war. An army with high morale was like having absolute confidence. The strength it displayed was incomparably powerful. On the surface, the demon race army's strength was not weaker than the shaman race army, especially when the shaman race army was led by Shi Jiuyin. Shaman Emperor Dijiang was not present, but the result was completely one-sided. Ha ha. In the military camp, Shi Jiuyin laughed wildly without restraint. His gloomy and cold eyes flashed with a confident luster. He was incomparably excited about this carefree victory. Swept away his depression. During the period when he was temporarily the shaman emperor, he had suffered a lot. He was suppressed and beaten by the demon race. The final defeat was engraved in his heart. It directly caused him to lose the hearts of the people. He was deserted by everyone and stepped down from the shaman emperor's position, becoming an abandoned pawn. Who would have thought that things would take a turn for the worse? Shaman Emperor Dijiang, who he had regarded as an enemy, had nurtured him. This victory could be said to have pulled him back from hell. With Dijiang's arrangement, he believed that he would be able to return to the shaman emperor's position in a short 1 year and lead the entire shaman race. This time, it would not be temporary, but permanent. He, Shi Jiuyin, would be the future shaman emperor. Thinking of this, Shi Jiuyin's eyes burned with ambition. He was extremely obsessed with power, even more so than strength. Reporting to the Shaman King, the Earth Shaman King has arrived. The guard reported. Is that so? Let him in. Shi Jiuyin's eyes lit up as he waved his hand. Now, as he turned hostility into friendship with the witch Emperor Jiang. He and Hudu were no longer enemies. Of course, their friendship was also ordinary. After all, they were once enemies. It was impossible for them to shake hands and make peace in the blink of an eye. They were still very unfamiliar with each other. Nine. Hutu slowly entered and nodded. Rare guest. Shi Jiuyin's lips curled into a cold sneer as he gestured for Huang Xiaolong to enter. There's no need. I'm just here to pass on a message. Hutu's eyes were burning as she spoke indifferently. Oh, Shi Jiuyin snorted disdainfully and said with a smile that didn't look like a smile. What kind of words could make the Hutu shaman king come personally? Jiuyin is overwhelmed by the favor. Hutu could hear the sarcasm in Shi Jiuyin's words. Her expression changed slightly, but she didn't take it to heart. She spoke slowly. Pass on the Witch Emperor's message. The Witch Race Army is to stop attacking and wait for further instructions. Shi Jiuyin frowned, looking at Hutu with suspicion. What kind of joke is this? My witch race's morale is at its peak. Our warriors are crazed for battle. On top of that, the demonic beast army's morale is low. With such a great advantage, you're telling me to stop the battle? Ridiculous. In Shi Jiuyin's eyes, it was indeed ridiculous. It felt like there was food in front of you, but someone suddenly told you you can't eat it. Wasn't this a joke? A light flickered in Hutu's eyes, but she said indifferently, I'm just here to pass on the Witch Emperor's message. You. Shi Jiuyin was enraged, but he quickly calmed down. He asked solemnly, Where is the Witch Emperor? I want to see him. Hutu shook her head. I don't know. The Witch Emperor seems to have something to do. Is that so? Shi Jiuyin narrowed his eyes. A sharp light glinted in his eyes. All right, I got it. Watching Shi Jiuyin's expression change, Hutu's eyes narrowed. She said earnestly, Let me give you a piece of advice. The Witch Emperor has his reasons for doing this. Don't play with fire. Without waiting for Shi Jiuyin's reply, Hutu turned and left, leaving Shi Jiuyin alone with a gloomy expression. A long time later, Shi Jiuyin's eyes were filled with disdain. Cowardly as a mouse, the opportunity is fleeting. It'll be gone if you miss it. Who knows if Hutu is telling the truth? Maybe the Witch Emperor didn't say so, or maybe he's just making up a rumor. Shi Jiuyin sneered. Maybe he's resentful, unwilling to accept me as the Witch Emperor, and is thinking of ways to frame me. If I let the demonic beast army leave, my reputation will be ruined. I won't be able to clear my name, even if I jump into the Yellow River. The so-called message is unclear. Even if he denies it, I can't do anything to him. There's no need to listen to his nonsense. Even if it's really the Witch Emperor's order, it doesn't matter. When a general is outside, the monarch's orders cannot be obeyed. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I must grab hold of it. Clenching his fists, Shi Jiuyin's eyes shone with determination. Wanted to give up the meat at his mouth, give up the best chance to make a name for himself. He wasn't willing. The war between the shamans and demonic beasts was in full swing. On the other side, the southern region was also buzzing with activity. A new broom sweeps clean. Lin Xiaodian was very clear about his identity and status. He also knew that Lin Feng had paved the way for him. Since that was the case, he had to strike while the iron was hot to secure his position. He didn't want to rely on Lin Feng's help every time. It was fine once in a while, but in the long run, it would affect the hearts of the people. First, stabilize the internal situation, then deal with the external situation. The policy of seclusion and locking the domain remained unchanged, but Lin Xiaodian put the selection plan on the table. Different from the God creation plan that Lin Feng had secretly selected, Lin Xiaodian's plan was more similar to Emperor Yao's plan when he was alive. Starting from the foundation, starting from the bloodline, the difference was that with the support of Lin Feng's resources, the level of the plan was different. Covering the entire southern region, it could be said that this was a subversive plan. The entire region would be divided into different levels to select the elites and test their aptitude. As long as the cultivators had the aptitude, they would be carefully nurtured, and there would be no mistakes. Various levels of martial dojos would be established, a perfect system would be set up, and the citizens would be divided into different levels. Poor cultivators would be given relief, and the peace of the entire region would be maintained, buying the hearts of the people from top to bottom and establishing a perfect legal system. For a time, the entire southern region was shaken. Of course, there were more people who applauded. After all, the majority of the people were at the bottom of society. The series of measures could be said to be spending money like flowing water. In an instant, the state treasury's wealth poured out like a flood, but Lin Xiaodian was not reluctant at all. In fact, Lin Feng was even more indifferent. He had long regarded money as dirt. Money? Lin Feng had too much. In Lin Xiaoyan's opinion, this was just establishing a cycle. If it was used for the people, it would definitely be taken from the people in the future. The more willing he was, the brighter the future of the southern region. Lin Feng naturally allowed his father to implement the new policies. He believed in his father's ability and believed that the southern region would become better and better under his leadership. Most importantly, therefore, he was free. In the Imperial Garden, Lin Feng was completely at ease. With 2 deputy region masters, there was no need to worry about anything else. His father was in charge of internal affairs, and Shun was in charge of external affairs. The division of labor was clear, and he mainly focused on cultivation. Just like in the kingdom of Meru, there was no need to explain how important a leader with absolute power was. What would happen to the witch Emperor Jiang if the witch race did not have him? What would happen to the demon race if they did not have a great sage? In the Douling world, the strong were respected. Heavenly Spirit was strong and was only stronger than the witch race and the demon race. Why could they only hibernate? One of the reasons was that it was difficult for the various neutral races to integrate. Another reason was that Heavenly Spirit did not have a real powerhouse who could convince the masses and stand out. He was comparable to the witch Emperor Jiang and the Great Sage. In the secret chamber, Lin Feng sat cross-legged with a serious expression. In front of him, there was a treasure that all powerhouses dreamed of, the Earth Pillar. It was one of the 3 heavenly treasures. My main body already has the Shield of Truth. It's enough. In addition, the Earth Pillar seems to be used by a heavenly warrior. My main body mainly cultivates the heavenly god lineage. It's not suitable. I should make the best use of it. Lin Feng muttered softly. After hesitating for a while, he decided to cooperate with the Earth Pillar. Even though this heavenly treasure was quite fierce, and even a supreme existence like the Great Sage was accidentally devoured by it, one could imagine how dangerous the Earth Pillar was. However, there was always danger. If he wanted to quickly increase his strength, how could he not take some risks? And the Earth Pillar was definitely the best choice. The strength of my doppelganger is now inferior to my main body. It's only at the level of a demonic emperor. If I want to improve further and surpass my main body to compete with which Emperor Jiang and the Great Sage, I can only rely on him. Lin Feng's gaze was deep. He knew very well how powerful a heavenly treasure was. After which Emperor Jiang merged with the heavenly ark, his strength more than doubled. After the Great Sage merged with the Earth Pillar, he was also reborn. Of course, the backlash after merging with the Earth Pillar was not included, and he believed that there would be no problem either. However, all of these were just his own thoughts. It was easier said than done to cooperate with a heavenly treasure. If he wanted to forcefully merge with it, like the Great Sage, let alone a year, with his strength, he might not be able to do it even after 8 to 10 years. He might even be devoured by the weapon spirit that devoured his master and lose his life. Back then, when he merged with the Shield of Truth, it was a fusion of bloodlines. There was also a bit of luck involved. However, if the Shield of Truth could do it, it did not mean that the Earth Pillar could. Many times, one could not jump to conclusions. Phew! After letting out a long breath, Lin Feng's slightly confused eyes slowly lit up. Whether it was possible or not, he would know once he tried. Earth Pillar. Lin Feng looked at the Earth Pillar in front of him that did not have any luster. He was indeed a little afraid. However, since he had made a decision, there was no need to hesitate. First, he would see if he had fate with this heavenly treasure. If he did, it would be like the shield of truth. Once he touched it, immediately, "Can I have it?" Lin Feng's eyes lit up. With a hint of anticipation and complicated emotions, Lin Feng slowly extended his right hand. 20,000. First, I'll fulfill my promise. No more nonsense. Continue writing. Xiao Xiao will use writing to accompany everyone on New Year's Eve. Chapter 1572. What would the answer be? Lin Feng was looking forward to it. His bright eyes showed his thoughts. Actually, he wanted to have it. His body contained the blood of madness. He reached out his right hand slowly and got closer. The earth pillar was close to him. The originally dim luster seemed to emit a faint luster as his right hand got closer. His heartbeat became faster and faster. The thumping sound was not only in his heart, but also in his ears. Lin Feng pursed his lips and felt the nervousness and apprehension in his heart. Wah! A white light shone in front of him. Lin Feng's eyes widened. Got it. Pong! His head seemed to explode. Lin Feng's whole body trembled slightly. His heart trembled. He instantly felt his heart and consciousness enter a mysterious world. It was grotesque and variegated. It emitted a special aura. It was familiar. That day, when he merged with the shield of reality, wasn't it the same? At the thought of this, Lin Feng felt a surge of excitement in his heart. Did this mean that he was about to merge with the earth pillar? The heart contract was so familiar. Every beat of his heart seemed to be connected to the pulse here. It was strange yet familiar. Majestic and powerful. It was as heavy as a mountain, and boundless pressure came from all directions. Boom! An earth-shattering sound. In an instant, a giant appeared in front of his eyes. It was indomitable. It was all too familiar. Like a huge tower, it held up the whole world. One hand held up the sky, and the other supported the ground. It had a domineering aura that made people unable to reach it. Pangu. His eyes were exactly the same as his original bodies. As expected, Lin Feng's heart trembled slightly. At this moment, he had already slowly regained his calm state of mind. That day, when he merged with the shield of reality, such a scene appeared. However, at that time, he didn't know who this giant was. Now, everything was clear, and he understood everything. The 3 heavenly treasures were formed from the last essence of the 12 ancestral shamans. The 12 ancestral shamans were Pangu's flesh and blood. In other words, these 3 heavenly treasures were actually the power that Pangu possessed. Wah! The illusion disappeared quickly. Lin Feng closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He knew what was going to happen, and what was going to happen. The energy of the earth pillar would fuse with his soul. This was the most direct connection, the most intimate connection, the connection between their hearts. There was no need to worry about the earth pillar rebelling. It was just like signing a master-servant contract with a magical beast. Once he fused with the earth pillar, he would truly possess it. But 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, time passed slowly like an hourglass. What should have happened did not happen. After waiting for a full minute, the calmness on Lin Feng's face slowly changed, revealing a look of surprise and confusion. Lin Feng slowly opened his eyes and frowned. What exactly happened? The whole process was exactly the same as the shield of truth, so why did it suddenly stop at the last step? His heart was filled with doubt. Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. He was still surrounded by that wonderful world, but at this moment, he seemed to have sensed something. Aura. Lin Feng was slightly startled, and his heart could not help but tremble. In this unique space world, he actually sensed the existence of an external aura. It was very weak, but it was so obvious. It was as if there was a small black dot on the snow-white wall. No matter how small the black dot was, it was so clear. This space was like this, monotonous and simple. Therefore, he could clearly sense this weak aura at this moment. What was it? Swoosh! Lin Feng's eyes lit up, and he was very curious. The aura was covered by the energy of the earth pillar. He could not sense it clearly, as if it was covered by a mask. With a thought, Lin Feng immediately followed the direction of the feeling. His figure flashed a few times, and his consciousness changed. In an instant, he entered the depths of the Earth Pillar's space. Light and shadow overlapped in front of him, one after another. Finally, he saw the light and saw the area where the feeling was. Lin Feng looked forward and took a deep breath. His eyes widened, and his expression changed greatly. No way. What did he see? Great Sage. It was the Great Sage. It was completely different from his consciousness. At this moment, the Great Sage was much smaller than him, but he was a real existence. He had flesh and blood, and the aura of his soul was very obvious. Like an enraged beast, he was madly struggling in a mucosa-like space. The mucosa-like space was constantly wriggling, and rays of light with strong power seemed to be slowly corroding the Great Sage. Witnessing this scene with his own eyes was too shocking. He originally thought that the Great Sage had died from the backlash, but he underestimated the vitality of the strongest demon. His talent was the strongest and most terrifying existence he had ever seen, even surpassing that of Shaman Emperor Jiang. Even his soul could survive the full force of the Pangu pupil's attack, and this was when his soul was not at its peak after the endless battle with the Earth Pillar spirit. So that's how it is. Lin Feng looked ahead and nodded. It seemed that although the Earth Pillar had attacked its master, it did not completely kill the Great Sage. Thinking about it, the fact that the Great Sage could forcefully merge with the Earth Pillar proved one thing, and that was the power of the Great Sage's soul was actually stronger than that of the Earth Pillar spirit. The reaction was mutual, and it took a lot of time. The Great Sage had been fighting with the spirit, and the Great Sage was constantly exhausting the power of his soul. However, wasn't the spirit doing the same? Therefore, although the final attack seemed very strong, it was actually just taking advantage of the fact that the Great Sage's soul was being greatly exhausted by its attacks. The Earth Pillar's spirit had not truly killed the Great Sage. However, soon, Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. It had been a long time since the battle that day. From the state of the Great Sage's aura, it could be seen that he was truly an arrow at the end of its flight. Without the replenishment of his body, it was already quite heaven-defying for him to be able to persist until now with just his talent and willpower. However, the Earth Pillar was different. This was its home ground, and it had the absolute advantage. It could naturally exhaust the Great Sage's power while absorbing the power of heaven and earth. It was like a spider slowly torturing its prey to death. The Great Sage's aura was constantly weakening. In that sealed space, no matter how much the Great Sage struggled, it was useless. His power was getting weaker and weaker. Previously, he was unable to break free from the Earth Pillar spirit. Now, it was even more impossible because his power was reaching its limit. He was going to lose. He was going to lose because he was careless, because he underestimated his opponent. What a pity. Lin Feng thought to himself, his eyes sparkling. To be honest, he admired the Great Sage. He was a true martial artist, and in some ways he was very similar to himself deep in his heart. However, he could not save him, nor would he save him. After all, they were enemies. 22,000 continue. Chapter 1573. No wonder I couldn't fuse with the Earth Pillar, even though I was already compatible with it. For the final step, the soul mate 0 never appeared. It was because of him, Lin Feng murmured. He finally understood. The Great Sage was still in the Earth Pillar, which meant that he had to move into a house. However, the original owner of the house hadn't moved out yet. Naturally, he couldn't move in. Only after the Great Sage's body and soul were destroyed and devoured could he truly possess the Earth Pillar. But was this really his original intention? Lin Feng pursed his lips and frowned. Looking at the trapped Great Sage, he couldn't help but think of himself and the southern region. Wasn't it the same for himself and the southern region? Trapped by the Witch Tribe and the Demon Tribe, they seemed to be able to survive, but in reality, they were struggling for their lives. The great sage was really giving it his all. Even if he lost all hope and knew that there was no way out, he didn't accept his fate. He didn't want to give up, even if there was only a sliver of hope. He was doing his best to survive. He was stubborn and stubborn. He could even feel that the great sage had seen him, but he didn't even look him in the eye. He didn't even think of asking for help. Although he was from the demon clan, he was a true warrior with an indomitable spirit. He had an extremely strong self-esteem. He had the heart of a true martial artist. Roar. He could almost hear the great sage's hysterical roar. He didn't want to accept his fate. He wanted to control reality. He was angry at the heavens. He didn't want to admit defeat. He didn't want to die in such a cowardly manner. However, fate made fools of people. Looking at him was like looking at himself in the past. He used to give up everything for the sake of his obsession. Even if he knew that it was a dead end, he still stubbornly walked down it. He wouldn't give up until the last moment. This kind of spirit was moving. Many times, many things could be decided with a single thought. One thought could be good. One thought could be evil. One thought could go to heaven. One thought could go to hell. When faced with the same situation, everyone's choices and actions would be different. Just like Lin Feng now. His previous thoughts had changed. He felt the great sage's spirit and his will to never give up. Somehow, he didn't want to watch him die. Give him a hand. But how could he help? In this area that did not belong to him, in the space of the earth pillar, his strength was also very insignificant. Lin Feng's eyes flickered. His body shifted and arrived outside the mucosal space. He frowned slightly as he looked at the mucosal space. He had a feeling that he did not know where to start. Ha! Their eyes met, and then the great sage turned to stare at Lin Feng. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes was incomparably complicated. Lin Feng knew very well that the great sage wasn't stupid. He knew why Lin Feng had come out of the mucosal space. However, they were on opposing sides. In fact, when he had barged into the demonic race's forbidden land, the great sage had shown no mercy and wanted to kill him without mercy. But now, he had to accept the enemy's favor. It was no wonder that the great sage had a complicated expression on his face. If it were him, he would probably feel the same way. However, Lin Feng didn't care what the great sage thought. Do what you need to do. Most of the time, it might not be a bad thing to follow your heart. Wasn't it tiring to think about everything carefully? Even if he rescued the great sage, so what? At most, he would fight him fair and square. However, whether or not the great sage had the ability to fight was another matter. Also, what would happen to the gray energy occupying the great sage's body? There were too many implications. If he really wanted to think about it, he wouldn't be able to come to a definite conclusion. As for himself, right now, he had to rescue the great sage first. Pa! Lin Feng reached out and touched the mucosal space's mucosal wall. It wasn't sticky. It looked soft, but it was actually formed from dense energy. Lin Feng frowned slightly. He didn't know how to break through the mucosal wall. It was actually very simple to rescue the great sage. As long as he could break through the mucosal wall, the great sage would be free. However, this simple step had stumped him. Only his consciousness had entered the earth pillar's space. There was also, yes, the power of the soul. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. The earth pillar was prepared to merge with him. The power of the soul was intertwined. Right now, it wasn't just his consciousness that stood here. There was also a portion of the power of the soul. What did it mean to possess the power of the soul? It meant power. Even if the one standing here wasn't his real body, the power of the soul was still power. He would know once he tried. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He focused his mind and instantly felt the presence of the power of the soul. Pa! His hands were pressed against the mucosal wall of the earth pillar. The power of the soul surged out and began to attack. Indeed, the human soul of the doppelganger didn't have any offensive abilities. However, that only applied to the attacks of heavenly soul masters. Here, however, was different. This was a world of pure souls. His own soul, the great sage's soul, was in a wrestling ring. They were fighting barehanded, and the opponent was the artifact spirit of the earth pillar, who had the geographical advantage. Rumble, rumble. The space trembled. Lin Feng's heart sank. He could faintly feel the anger of the earth pillar. Lin Feng laughed bitterly inside. He had been too impulsive. He had completely forgotten what kind of existence the earth pillar was. Its spirit was truly intelligent. How could it not sense his attack? However, he had already done it. What else could he do? I'm afraid that even if I give up now, the possibility of merging with the earth pillar in the future is extremely small. Lin Feng smiled helplessly. His mistake had led him to the opposite side of the earth pillar spirit. Perhaps if he didn't save the great sage now, the great sage's body and soul would be destroyed in no time. He would be completely swallowed by the earth pillar spirit. At that time, he would be able to merge with the earth pillar, and the power of his doppelganger would rise to another level. However, there were no ifs in this world. None of this could happen again. Fine, it's fate. Lin Feng's eyes flashed coldly. He was destined to have no fate with the earth pillar. It was the same for the first time and the second time. Even if he merged with the earth pillar, there was no guarantee that it wouldn't attack him again in the future. There was no turning back. Since he had already done it, he might as well cut the weeds and get rid of the roots. Come, Lin Feng shouted, his eyes shining brightly. Vast amounts of soul power surged out of his head and struck the thin mucous membrane. At this moment, as if he had heard his own voice, the great sage's originally dim eyes suddenly lit up. He clenched his fists and roared. As if he had ignited the blood of the beast in his body, he charged forward again. Bang! Bang! He attacked desperately. Although the great sage was an arrow at the end of its flight, he was still quite smart. He knew that good steel should be used on the blade. He didn't attack the other membrane, but the membrane where Lin Feng was. He gathered his strength and poured out his remaining soul power. He knew very well that this was his last and only chance. If he didn't succeed, he would die trying. Either he didn't do it, or he would do it thoroughly. Lin Feng threw caution to the wind. Although the entire space shook violently and the earth pillar's angry voice sounded in his mind, he couldn't care less. Attack after attack, the membrane became thinner and thinner, and the energy leaked out quickly. Boom, boom, boom. The entire space shook as if it was about to collapse. Lin Feng's eyes were deep. He didn't care at all. It was just a wisp of his soul power here. Even if he was buried here, he would only lose a little soul power. It wouldn't cause much harm to his clone. Suddenly, a small figure of light appeared in his mind. Lin Feng's heart trembled. The earth pillar's weapon spirit? He saw that the small figure of light was unusually anxious. It even lowered its head and begged for mercy, as if it wanted him to let it go. The anger from before was completely gone. The weapon spirit now was quite comical, like a dream. Lin Feng was moved. It was real. The exchange of souls between souls is equal. Perhaps the earth pillar's weapon spirit was originally very strong, but after going through battle after battle and being continuously exhausted by the great sage, it's probably an arrow at the end of its flight. Therefore, although my soul power isn't strong, but with the great sage's remaining strength, it's just enough to kill it. It was indeed a mistake. Lin Feng was moved. He sighed slightly. Instantly, his eyes darkened, and the image in his mind was blocked. What's done is done. What's there to regret? From the subtle clues, this earth pillar's weapon spirit was definitely not a good person. It was a complete villain. It was angry and threatened before. Now that it was about to lose its life, it didn't even care about its dignity. Fortunately, he didn't fuse with it. Otherwise, it would be a ticking time bomb in his body that would explode at any time. In comparison, the great sage was much more open and aboveboard. The 9 sons of the dragon were all different, but that didn't mean that the artifact spirits born from heavenly treasures were all outstanding. Artifact spirits and artifact spirits were born from the artifact spirit before the artifact spirit. There were too many factors involved in the birth of an artifact spirit. Its growth and emergence of wisdom were also influenced by various factors. Not every artifact spirit was the same. Take Wing, for example. His personality was greatly influenced by the first martial artist he devoured. If he were to start over, he would definitely have a different personality. Actually, it's not necessarily a bad thing, Lin Feng thought. Such an outstanding heavenly treasure has such an unsightly weapon spirit. It's an insult to the earth pillar. If I destroy it, I believe that a weapon spirit born under the earth pillar will be much better. Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. His mind was even more resolute. At this moment, under his and the great sage's concerted efforts, the membrane was getting thinner and thinner. Its luster was also gradually dimming. The collapse of the surrounding space was getting smaller and smaller. It was as if it had lost all its strength. An inaudible voice sounded in his mind. Lin Feng ignored it. Break! Lin Feng's eyes widened. Soul power surged out. Boom! The membrane's energy instantly shattered. The entire earth pillar's space shook violently. A wave of energy disappeared in an instant. 25,000. Continue writing. Prepare for the new year. Xiao Xiao has already gone crazy. Huh. Chapter 1574. Bang! Like a firework explosion. The membrane was shattered. Although only one side was shattered, the entire membrane space had lost its luster and was devoid of life. It was like a cultivator losing his life force. Simply put, it was the death of the soul. The one who had died was the earth pillar spirit. It was the powerful existence that had transformed into this membrane space. Perhaps its soul was indeed powerful and had reached the starry sky level, but it had been exhausted after countless battles with the great saint. Coupled with Lin Feng's sudden intervention, it was caught off guard. It was exactly the same as when it had devoured the great saint. There was a cause, and there was an effect. The spirit was dead. The entire space shook violently and was about to disappear. Looking at the great saint who had lost all his strength and was lying on the ground, Lin Feng's eyes flashed. He didn't say anything and didn't expect anything in return. Although he didn't know whether his mistake was good or bad, there was no need to regret it. Whether it was right or wrong, he would know in the future. But now, everything was a foregone conclusion. Looking at the exhausted great saint, Lin Feng breathed a sigh of relief. Without saying anything, he closed his eyes and disappeared. This was all he could do to help him. Whoosh, when he regained consciousness, Lin Feng's eyes flashed, and he could see clearly. He had come out of the earth pillar space. It felt like a lifetime had passed. The scenes from before were still clearly imprinted in his mind. The battle in the earth pillar space was as intense as a fight between two evenly matched opponents. What had he done? Lin Feng couldn't help but laugh. He also felt that his impulsiveness was laughable. If it was before, he would absolutely not do such a thing. However, after he had removed the heavy burden from his shoulders, his entire person seemed to have changed a lot. He looked at the earth pillar. At this moment, the earth pillar didn't have any luster. It was like an inanimate object, lying quietly on the ground. Without its spirit, it was just a pure and simple weapon, staff. Although it was still a heavenly treasure, it had lost its ability to turn something rotten into something magical. But in terms of the quality of the staff, there was probably nothing in the entire Douling world that could surpass it. Lin Feng smiled. He could only find joy in his misery. A heavenly treasure was now a piece of scrap metal. He didn't know anything about staff techniques. Moreover, the clone already had the Doomsday Spear and no longer needed other weapons. I wonder what the great sage will do. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled as he stared at the earth pillar. He believed that the great sage was still trapped within the earth pillar's dimension. In truth, the great sage had nowhere to go. Losing his fleshly body was akin to becoming a wandering ghost. He was most likely residing within the earth pillar's dimension. Did he still have a chance to come back to life? He didn't know, and he couldn't care less. She had already helped him to this point. Whether he was a dragon or a snake from now on would depend on his own luck. Thinking of this, Lin Feng couldn't help but nod his head. He let out a sigh of relief and stood up. Just as he was frowning and pondering, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Lin Feng was startled and instantly regained his senses. His gaze landed on the pillar that was lying quietly on the ground. Whoosh! Golden light suddenly burst forth. Lin Feng's eyes widened and his heart thumped. The originally dim earth pillar seemed to suddenly have a soul and strangely came to life. This brilliant golden light was so familiar. It was extremely similar to the earth pillar that he saw on Demon Emperor Island. Could it be his? Lin Feng took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with shock. It was too shocking. It wasn't just the golden light. A familiar aura also slowly appeared. The earth pillar suddenly rose into the air. The brilliant golden light covered the entire area and formed a golden shadow. It was a figure that he was extremely familiar with. It had a robust body and muscles that were filled with explosive power. It also had a pair of clear eyes that were filled with fighting spirit. The fiery red gaze slowly gathered, but the gaze that was looking at him was extremely complicated. The Great Sage, the entity formed by the golden shadow, was undoubtedly the Great Sage. Moreover, this wasn't an illusion. It was the Great Sage who truly had an ideology. Just from the changes in his eyes, one could tell. Lin Feng gently pursed his lips. His expression was both shocked and complicated. He vaguely understood what had happened. Was it because of his careless decision that he had saved his mortal enemy? Lin Feng. The Great Sage suddenly opened his mouth. His expression was serious. Phew. Lin Feng let out a long breath and smiled faintly. I didn't expect you to still remember my name. The Great Sage's fiery red eyes flashed. He looked at Lin Feng. After a long time, he said, I owe you my life. After saying that, he didn't seem to know what to say or how to face Lin Feng. The Great Sage suddenly turned around and left. Lin Feng was left alone. He looked at the golden light that slowly disappeared before his eyes. After a long time, he shook his head with a bitter smile. Wasn't this considered as losing the bait after the bait? He had saved an enemy who was even more powerful than himself. He had even sacrificed the heavenly treasure, the earth pillar. His mistake was quite a big one. Lin Feng let out a long sigh. There was nothing he could do. He had already done it. What else could he do? Actually, when a great sage was revived, he had already thought of this. He had forgotten one thing. The great sage was actually the earth pillar's master. He wasn't a parasite. He had once perfectly merged with the earth pillar. Now that the artifact spirit was dead, he was the only one in control. Naturally, he could control the earth pillar. It was even possible that he had taken over the role of the artifact spirit. One soul for two. Why couldn't it? The heavenly treasure was so powerful. How hard could it be to create a physical body? With the earth pillar as his physical body, I'm afraid he's immortal. Such an opponent. Lin Feng closed his eyes. He felt a headache coming on. The trouble was getting bigger. After a long time, Lin Feng slowly opened his eyes. He muttered to himself, not necessarily. Different bodies have different strengths. Not to mention how long it will take to adapt to a new body. It's still unknown how much of the great sage's strength this transformed body can unleash. Moreover, the great sage's soul was severely damaged. I'm afraid he won't be able to fight for a while. Also, there are two great sages. If they want to fight, they should fight first, including Witch Emperor Jiang. Let them fight to their heart's content. At least it's my turn to fight until the victor is decided, right? Why would I have a headache? Lin Feng sneered. If there was a headache, it should be Witch Emperor Jiang. One great sage was troublesome enough. Two great sages. I can totally imagine what kind of expression he'll have. Actually, from another perspective, the resurrection of the great sage didn't do any harm to me. It wasn't his fault that he wanted to kill me that day. It was me who angered him. He barged into the Demon Emperor's forbidden ground and massacred the elites of the demon race. If I were in his shoes, I would have done the same. With the great sage's personality, I'm indebted to him for saving his life. This is a fact that won't change. In the future, even if I can't become friends with the great sage, at least I won't be enemies. On the contrary, because of this change, Another unstable factor was added to the already chaotic situation between the witch and demon race. To the southern region and the humans, the more chaotic the Doling world was, the better. The more confusing the battle situation was, the more benefits the humans could gain from it and buy time. The only regret was the heavenly treasure is lost again. Lin Feng smiled bitterly and shook his head. He was destined to not have the Earth Pillar. Losing the Earth Pillar was not a small loss to Lin Feng, but it was a foregone conclusion. Lin Feng wouldn't feel sorry for himself. Time was tight. As the human emperor, Lin Feng had to cultivate at the fastest speed and increase his strength to face all kinds of situations. Since there was a first time, there would be a second and third time. He didn't know when the witch and demon race would target the southern region and him again. Even though the two races were at war and wouldn't rest until one of them died, one could never be too careful. Only by making sufficient preparations would one not be afraid of sudden changes. Be prepared for danger in times of peace. In the secret chamber, Lin Feng sat cross-legged. Countless star origin stones were placed in front of him. That's right, they were the rare items that he had plundered from the Demon Emperor Island. After spending a total of 47 billion wizard coins worth of star origin stones, there was still quite a large amount left. Lin Feng did a rough calculation and found that the remaining amount was about 25 billion wizard coins worth of star origin stones. These 25 billion wizard coins worth of star origin stones were just a drop in the ocean to the Netherworld ship. It was useless. However, to Lin Feng himself, they were very useful. Absorb and refine. These were star origin stones that were born from the heavens and earth. They contain the true power of heaven and earth and the true star origin energy. According to Duo, the purity was quite good. If he absorbed these star origin stones, his cultivation speed would increase by leaps and bounds. It would far surpass his cultivation speed that was as slow as a turtle. Sprint, a breakthrough from high-order Saint King realm to peak Saint King realm. Hiss. Lin Feng absorbed as much as he could. The more capacity his body had, the faster his absorption speed would be. Lin Feng was completely immersed in his cultivation. His clone's talent was not bad. His cultivation speed was also quite shocking. Even though he was still a distance away from the great Saint King Dijiang of the Doling world, this comparison was not appropriate. How long had his clone cultivated? Not to mention the old monster wizard Dijiang. How long had the great saint cultivated? Each of them had cultivated for much longer than his clone. Therefore, the battle techniques they had comprehended and the mysteries they had grasped were superior. Although they were both from the Ursa major constellation, Lin Feng's attainments in both the path of metal and the path of strength were weaker than that of a great sage. Even the great sage's weakest path of space was much stronger than Lin Feng's. A battle between Saint Kings was very important for the comprehension of the Tao of origin. However, the comprehension of the Tao depended on the timing. It needed time to settle down. It could not be achieved overnight. Compared to the Tao that he did not know when he would be able to comprehend it, Lin Feng was more inclined to improve his strength in a short period of time. For example, treasures, strength level, and so on. First, he had to close these small gaps and improve those that could be improved first. After that, he would slowly close the gap in the comprehension of the Tao. 28,000. I still have energy left. I'll write one more chapter and break through the 30,000 mark. If I'm going to update, I'll update to my heart's content. Xiao Xiao will celebrate the new year with everyone. Chapter 1575. From high-level Saint King realm to peak Saint King realm, it was neither long nor short. Even if Lin Feng had sufficient astral origin stones, he would still have a long way to go. However, that was not a big deal. The southern region had Shun and Lin Xiaotian watching over it. It could be said that everything was stable without any openings. Especially the new policies that Lin Xiaotian issued, they made up for the southern region's lack of resources. restoring the faith of Emperor Yao and further strengthening it. After all, when Emperor Yao was on the throne, the southern region was as poor as a church mouse. Compared to Lin Feng's current wealth, the difference was like heaven and earth. Money wasn't everything, but it was impossible to do anything without money, especially when it came to managing a region. The new policies were quickly implemented. Praises for the new deputy domain, Lord Lin Xiaotian, could be heard in various continents and counties. Sometimes, people's hearts changed very quickly. The southern region continued to develop steadily. The flames of war between the shaman and demon tribes intensified with each passing day. Despite Hutu's warning, Shi Jiuyin had always acted alone. Why would he pay attention to Hutu? If Shaman Emperor Jiang was here, perhaps Shi Jiuyin would listen to him. But Hutu, who was he? Kill. Seeing the demonic beast army's morale plummeting, how could Shi Jiuyin let go of such a good opportunity? Not to mention, the Shaman tribe's army could no longer hold back. One by one, the Shaman tribe's experts rushed out like wolves and tigers. The resentment and killing intent that had been accumulating for a long time exploded. In an instant, the demonic beast army's wails and howls were heard. They fought and fled. The demonic beast army was routed. Ha ha ha! Shi Jiuyin laughed wantonly. This time he was elated. Defeating the demonic beast army, killing countless demonic beasts, this kind of battle merit was enough to erase some of his misdeeds when he was the Shaman Emperor. The past was easy to forget, especially when these misdeeds were covered up bit by bit. Soon, they will only remember that I, Shi Jiuyin, beat the demonic beast army back to the sea. I, Shi Jiuyin, am the true successor of the Shaman Emperor. Hovering in the air, he commanded the Shaman tribe's army. Shi Jiuyin was in high spirits, and his might was unparalleled in the world. Under his command, the sorcerer race's army was invincible. Their repeated victories had given the sorcerer race's army a kind of blind confidence. The demon race was nothing more than this. There was nothing to fear at all. However, they had forgotten. Previously, how did the demons beat them to the point that they couldn't go out? How foolish. Lam Tok Ti sneered. You need strength, but not brains. Fox G giggled. The sorcerer tribe really thinks that Lord Commander is dead. I wonder who started the rumor. Really, if you want to make up something, why don't you make it up better? When I first heard it, I was also shocked, Lam Tok Ti said indifferently, his eyes flashing. But with the commander's strength, who can kill him? That day, in a one-on-one battle, the commander had only lost to which Emperor Jiang and suffered some injuries. But when you see the commander again, don't you feel that something is different? Light flashed in Fox Princess's beautiful eyes. Stronger than before? Not really. Lam Tok Ti shook his head, his brows slightly furrowed. The commander's aura has changed greatly. If not for his appearance, I would have suspected that he had changed into a different person. Fox G chuckled. Who cares if he changed or not? Is it important? That's true. Lam Tok Ti said nonchalantly, his arm wrapped around Fox G's waist. After all, we're not on the same path. We're just using each other to get what we need. Me too. Fox G's charming eyes fluttered as she stared at Lam Tok Ti. Why would you agree? Lam Tok Ti laughed heartily. Kill, kill, kill. The sorcerer tribe's army was in a frenzy, including Shi Jiuyin himself. He led the way, tearing the demonic beast experts into pieces. The entire battlefield was filled with the smell of blood. The demonic beast experts were routed, retreating in defeat, while the sorcerer tribe's army chased after them. Battle merits. Huge amounts of battle merits. At this moment, other than battle merits, there was nothing else in Shi Jiuyin's eyes. But he had forgotten one of the greatest dangers in war, advancing rashly due to greed. Even though there are no Saint King realm masters in this demonic beast army, there are many of them. Killing all of these defeated demonic beast experts is equivalent to killing a dozen Saint King realm masters. It will also arouse the sorcerer tribe's domineering aura, pushing them to attack the demonic beast army's next line of defense. Again and again, again and again, do it in one go. Shi Jiuyin's eyes glimmered as he sped forward. Suddenly, wait. Shi Jiuyin was startled, but he suddenly felt something was wrong. This was a familiar rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. His heartbeat quickened, and Shi Jiuyin felt a bone-chilling cold, as if his spine was frozen stiff. He felt something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. The battle was going too smoothly, so smoothly that he couldn't feel the demonic beast army's resistance. It was as if they were slaughtering a group of weak humans. Shi Jiuyin's throat went dry. In that instant, Shi Jiuyin's eyes shone brightly. He yelled, "Stop, stop quickly." Shi Jiuyin roared at the top of his lungs. Using all his strength, he screamed hysterically. An image appeared in Shi Jiuyin's mind. It was a battle he had never experienced, but he had heard of countless times. No, it should be called a tragedy, the Battle of the Fallen Shaman Mountain Range. It was that time when the sorcerer tribe suffered a crushing defeat, losing the initiative and losing several cities to the demonic beast army. It was an extremely miserable time. This time, it was so similar. Boom! A deafening rumble of thunder resounded. Like a thunderclap, the terrifying power seemed to shatter the space around them. It was so terrifying that even the sky felt like it was going to shatter. Even if Shi Jiuyin shouted, it was too late. He couldn't control the frenzied sorcerer tribe experts, and he couldn't even control himself. A sudden change occurred. Bang, bang, bang. The earth quaked, mountains crumbled, and the earth cracked. As the thunderclap reverberated, the blood on the ground and the stench of blood in the air evaporated in an instant. A terrifying aura spread out in all directions. Zhong! Rumble, rumble! The earth shook and the sky shook. Even the color of the sky darkened, and the shrill cries of evil spirits resounded in the void. Boom! 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 Mountains collapsed one after another. The earth had completely collapsed, and even the sky had changed color. The entire space was shrouded by a terrifying power. Demonic beasts and devils danced in the air, and lightning flashed in the sky, as if they wanted to scatter the evil spirits' souls. The terrifying aura condensed into a magnetic force, and a terrifying power arose. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The mountains collapsed, and strange patterns appeared in the middle of the collapsed mountains. The patterns were pitch black with a hint of blood red, dazzling to the eyes. It was blood. The blood-red color covered the entire mountain range. The blood seeped into the pitch-black patterns, mixing with the patterns, creating a strange power that resonated with each other. The patterns flickered with a black light, like a magnetic pole, and connected, dividing the space. The mountain peaks formed natural magnetic poles, and each of the patterns seemed to be the birth of a demonic power. Blood Fiend 10,000 Ghost Formation. The terrifying forbidden array that had knocked the sorcerer tribe into the bottomless abyss that day appeared once again. The only difference was that Shaman King Gomang was the one who had suffered the last time, and this time, it was Shi Jiuyin. Huh, what a stupid sorcerer tribe. Lam Tok T's eyes lit up, and he sneered. Indeed, they still haven't learned their lesson after falling for it once. Yuji pursed her lips. How boring. I even prepared a backup plan for them. Who would have thought that they would trigger the Blood Fiend 10,000 Ghosts array before they could even pass the first stage? They really thought that the Great Saint was dead, and the morale of the demon race's army was low. Lam Tokti laughed. In fact, they just beat them at their own game. They were blinded by victory. The sorcerer tribe is nothing more than this. Yuji's eyes were like silk, and she smiled sweetly. Last time, Di Jiang saved them. This time, I'm afraid Di Jiang has no time to spare. Lam Tok Ti laughed heartily. Commander, Deputy Commander, no matter how strong Di Jiang is, I'm afraid he will have to return with a grievance. Yuji covered her mouth and chuckled. Her bell-like laughter was filled with confidence, as if she was predicting the outcome of this war. Chaos. The densely packed sorcerer tribe experts were in a complete mess at this moment. As the ground caved in, lightning flashed in the sky, making it impossible for them to escape. The magnetic pole had an extremely strong binding force, as if it had tied them up in the void, making them unable to move at all. Sure, Joeen's expression was extremely ugly. At this moment, he had already reacted, but it was already too late. Catching a turtle in a jar. Ooh, ooh. A terrifying disaster had finally arrived. The magnetic pole's power exploded, and various kinds of magnetic light flashed wildly, fluctuating violently. Black carvings mixed with blood, tearing the space apart, and ghost-like cracks appeared. In the cracks, countless ghost soldiers suddenly appeared, with ghostly colors, holding battle blades, and a terrifying aura descended. Saint-level ghost soldiers. Bang! 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 It was a complete mess. The ghost soldiers and the magnetic light formed a line, crazily attacking the Sorcerer Tribe's army. The Blood Fiend 10,000 Ghost formation once again displayed its miraculous effect. The Sorcerer Tribe's army, led by Sure Joeen, were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. At this moment, they were completely dumbfounded. Their originally high morale had long since dissipated. The Sorcerer Tribe was facing a great calamity. On the other side, an earth-shattering battle was about to break out. In midair, Bull Demon and the Great Sage had surrounded Di Jiang. In terms of strength, either one of them was not enough to trap Di Jiang, but with the two of them working together, no matter how strong Di Jiang was, there was nothing he could do. The Bull Demon's wounds were glaring, dripping with blood. Even the Great Sage had suffered some injuries. 2 against 1. Di Jiang was not at a disadvantage. Too strong. His strength was bottomless. However, which Emperor Zhong's expression was rather ugly as he stepped on the heavenly arc. Even though he had an absolute advantage in terms of speed and agility, he could only injure the Bull Demon King or the Great Saint at most. It would be rather difficult to deal a heavy blow to either of them. Not to mention that the two were extremely powerful. Just their coordination alone was exquisite. They would not give him any good chances at all. Di Jiang's situation was not as advantageous as it seemed. 31,000. The final sprint for the end of the year is over. Xiao Xiao was completely exhausted, but she was still very excited. Haha. To be honest, Xiao Xiao had never tried to write so many words in a day. The most she had ever written before was 15,000, but this time, 25,000 in 1 day, 40,000 in 2 days, 55,000 in 3 days. She was really crazy. I'm going to celebrate the new year with everyone. The fire refining Starry Sky is coming to an end. I hope everyone can continue to support Xiao Xiao's new book in the coming year. Xiao Xiao promises that the new book's updates will definitely satisfy everyone. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.